What is a faked up memory you have from your childhood that you didn't realize was faked up until you grew older? I always had a memory of two people fighting and me watching it from my dad's car. Always thought it was a dream until my grandma told me the story of it. When I was 2,5, my mother kidnapped me and my dad chased her with his car. Some neighbors blocked my mother's way and my dad basically threw me in the backseat of his car. He wanted to drive away, but my cookie mother put her hands on the front of the car and refused to move. My dad just simply got out, kicked my mother's legs so hard she collapsed. Then he drove away and took me to my grandparents' house. Never saw my mother after that, and I'm thankful. TLDR, what I thought was a very vivid dream turned out to be my very first memory of my father being a total badass. Edit. To give you guys a little bit of a backstory, my mother wanted custody over me, and since she was losing, she thought this would work. This wasn't the only faked up thing she did. She locked me up in a house full of cats, which resulted in me getting horribly sick, body full of scratches, now allergic to cats. She poured shampoo in my eyes if I cried. She beat me and her other kid. She locked my dad in her house, called the cops, and said that my dad abused her. She was an abusive, lying scumbag, so of course my dad was on his last straw with her. My dad tried to take care of her other child too, but she disappeared with the kid. So yeah, please don't make any assumptions about my dad. He gave me the official documents a few months ago. It's a 15-page long sheet. I've also met a lot of social workers and witnesses who helped my family. My dad is a superhero for me. Single dads are awesome. Oh, and even though my dad doesn't know a lot about the internet, I'm gonna tell him that over 2K people find him badass. Will boost his ego. Edit 2. He is very surprised and feels slightly embarrassed because he isn't proud of hurting a woman. But he's thankful to all of you and he hopes that none of you will judge him. He also wishes the best of luck to single moms and dads. When I was very little, under 5 years, I had severe ear problems and spent a lot of time at ear/nose/throat specialists' offices and had a couple of ear surgeries. As I got older, my ears got better, but I couldn't do things like go underwater for too long, etc. Once when I was older, 13 or 14, I got a severe ear infection to where I could not move my head from a tilted position because I could feel fluids start to reach the infection and cause even more severe pain. I told my parents about it, and my father became inexplicably angry. He insisted that I straighten my head and just suck it up and go to school. I remember him just yelling, cussing, and accusing me of faking illness. I pleaded to my mom that I could not move my head and that it hurt really bad. Finally my father yelled, "Fine, but you're coming with me and I'm going to take you to the doctor." He said it like it was a threat. My parents were self-employed, so we got in the car and he drives me to a house and has me wait in the car while he goes and gives an estimate for service to a potential client. Then he goes to another home to check in his employees. I asked when we would be going to see the doctor and he just said later. We went about his usual business day, buying his workers lunch, seeing clients, etc. and just went straight home afterwards. He must have said 5 words to me during that whole day, and I probably really needed a doctor, or at the very least, antibiotics. To this day I cannot rationalize the events of that day. My parents were never abusive, negligent, mean, although they were tough disciplinarians, or anything like that to us kids. As a dad now, I cannot fathom ever treating my children this way. I wonder what was really going on that I was not aware of. I know when I was younger my parents had health insurance through their employer, hence the early hospital visits. Perhaps when they became self-employed they had no insurance. Still, I would never jeopardize my children's health like this on the chance they may be faking it. My mum used to take me to work with her when there wasn't enough money for a babysitter. From around the age of 3/4 I used to hang out in a dive bar most nights. The patrons were cool, used to give me change to buy lollies, or buy me a pink lemonade, or whatever. There were some slot machines in the back and some of the guys let me sit on their knee and push buttons for them. I'd play cards with some of them, got taught how to roll cigarettes for the old guys with arthritis. When I got tired I would just curl up under a table and go to sleep. Looking back as a parent myself now, that is super messed up, and I'm surprised no one called the authorities. It was the early 90s but still. Edit. I know a lot of kids have good experiences in bars with their parents ECT point, so I thought I'd add some detail as to why this was negative for me personally. I would be there until closing time, generally around 2 or 3 am. My mother would not monitor me at all. I would often walk off down the road and be returned by the guy who ran the service station at the end of the street. She would run errands, buying smokes, or whatever, and leave me there. Some of the patrons were nice and stuff but many were pretty intimidating. Sometimes fights would break out. I remember once I cut myself on chunks of glass on the floor under the table after a fight and my mum made me wait until the next day to take me to get stitches. I think with older kids this probably works a bit better as they're a bit more self-sufficient, or when the other parent picks up the kid as soon as they can. I was 3 when it started. My mother was pretty neglectful at the best of times. Mum and I moved houses a lot and there was a time where we used to live on a pretty rough estate. It was a nice enough house, but I was of the age where I wanted to go outside and play with other kids. Mum allowed me a lot of freedom, so I was able to go outside alone as and when I wished, provided it wasn't too late at night. I was 9 at the time. I didn't get to be very picky with my playmates. They ranged from 6-year-old boys who threw bricks at my head to 12-year-old girls who somehow thought dating 25-year-old men was okay. I went into their homes. Cesspit 6-year-old girls with sexual posters all over their walls and makeup everywhere. Siblings under the age of 7 who knew way more about sex than I did. I went into their poorly kept homes, saw the squalor, the horrific conditions in which they lived. Mattresses covered with dirt and filth, food on the floor. It was overwhelming. It opened my eyes and made me realize my mum was either some kind of fairy princess or I was just living a much better life, and it filled me with guilt which I didn't truly understand until I grew older. Most faked up was one day I was home alone. My mum had nipped out to the shops, which were really close by, and our front door was unlocked. One boy from one of these faked up families, who was about 16, came into our house and cornered me. Knocked me to the ground, started to undo my trousers. I kicked him away somehow, and he ran off. I had to give a statement to the police, and he was sent away. A few weeks later, his teenage girlfriend threatened to kill me because he was sent away. Bear in mind I was 9 myself. So yeah, got some kid put away because he attempted to rap me, got threatened to be killed over it. We moved shortly after, thankfully. But fuck me, when I look back on it, that was a majorly faked up neighborhood, and I'm amazed my mum let me out at all. Haha. My father was a compulsive gambler and I didn't realize it until I was full grown. When I was 15, my father drove 2 hours out of his way with me in the car to visit a casino. He wouldn't say where we were going until we got there, then had me wait in the car while he went inside, promising to return in a little while. An hour and a half later, I got out of the car and went into the casino looking for him. Security spotted me immediately and kicked me out. Back in the car, another hour went by before dad finally came walking out of the casino. I thought, great, we can get out of here now. But no, it was not to be. Instead he asked me if I had any money on me. When I produced $7 he grabbed it and quickly went back into the casino. 10 minutes later we were driving back home. That's when he asked me to promise not to tell mom where we'd been. This kind of thing happened a time or two more as I grew up, watching him gamble until all of his money was gone, never able to quit winners. It took me more years than I'd like to admit before I realized that my father was a compulsive gambler and had been throwing away precious family resources all my life. I remember feeling tremendously saddened by the realization that, after everything was said and done, my father was a very flawed human being. It took me even more years to realize that all humans are flawed in one way or another, and that's really not what matters. What matters is what we do about it. During the Christmas season, when I was about 7, my brother and I went along with our parents to the local Kmart, where we were usually allowed to hang out in the toy section, as long as we stayed together, while they went off to gather whatever present things they needed to buy without us hanging around. My brother wasn't great at following rules in general, and I'm sure I was being a pain in his 9-year-old that day, so he left me in the Barbie aisle while he went over 2 aisles to the outdoor toys and gear section to look at the BB guns and such, with instructions that I wait for him there and not move. Back in Barbie land, I'm checking out the doll that I'm considering asking for Christmas, when an older gentleman enters the aisle and begins to make a show of perusing the items in stock and comparing them to a list in a notebook he's holding. After a few moments of this, he makes a show of seeing me, confirming that I have quite good taste in dolls and would likely be able to help him on his quest. He's in search of some toys for his friend, he says, very special ones, and he's not sure if they have what he wants in this store. He asks if he can show me some pictures of the type of toys he's interested in buying. Maybe I've seen them somewhere and can point him in the right direction. Young me was taught to help out older folks, keeping the elderly neighbors company, helping them with their chores, etc. So I didn't immediately think anything overtly strange of this man, and he seemed to be very concerned with finding just the right gift for his friend. I nod my assent, for some reason suddenly tongue-tied, and he crouches down to my level and pulls out some Polaroid type photos from within the notebook he's holding. While I'm watching, he flips through them one by one, before handing me the stack and telling me to get a good close look at them. With cold fingers, I did as I was told and flipped through them on my own, looking closely, not seeing any toys I was familiar with. I handed back the stack and told him sorry, but I couldn't help him, and I needed to get back to my parents. As soon as I was to the end of the aisle, I nearly sprinted down to the end of the section to grab my brother, and no questions asked he grabs my hand and we both booked it across the store to find the parents, neither of us really knowing what suddenly felt so off, but both of us feeling it. I say nothing about my encounter with the man. Parents, also apparently picking up on the weird vibe, don't say boo about us ruining any Christmas surprises by not waiting for them to come find us and immediately head to checkout and leave. Neither bro nor I ever desired to tag along on a shopping trip again, unless we had to stay with them, and I personally never set foot inside a Kmart again unless compelled. Also, never wanted to play with a Barbie doll again. None of these weird feelings ever really made sense to me until several years later, when I saw Born for the first time, and I suddenly knew that's what that man was trying to show me. The photos were hardcore pornographic, most containing a dominant and a submissive. I clearly remember a man on all fours with a Red Bull in his mouth and someone standing over him with a whip, and all their clothing was just straps of leather. Since figuring it out, I've never really known what to do with it. I suppose it's just a faked up memory I have to live with, and pray that my baby girl will never have to live with anything like it. TLDR, creepy eye-shoulder dude approaches 7-year-old girl in Barbie aisle of Kmart to show her amateur porno Polaroids, and ask where he can find toys like that. I think I was about 8, and playing in the park. There's a new kid at school, named Kulikov, who seems a bit weird. Anyway, I'm at the park playing when the new kid comes over. Turns out he lives in the house next to the park. No dad, just him and his mum. He asks me to come over to his house, so I say, okay, to be friendly. Inside is fine but a bit quiet. Seems a bit messy, but I think they've only just moved. After a while he asks me if I want to see something interesting. I say okay. He proceeds to tell me his mum is a super heavy sleeper. You can go into her room and she will never wake up. Do I want to see? This was full daytime, maybe 12:00. I say no thanks. What do I care? I'm a little boy, I have no interest in girls yet. But he keeps bugging me to do this, so in the end I give in, and we tiptoe into his mother's room, and sure enough she is sleeping on the bed, and doesn't wake up. From what I can see she might be naked, certainly isn't wearing any visible clothes. Posture is a bit weird for someone sleeping on her back, head slightly turned to one side. Can't hear any snoring or anything. Not that I noticed this as a child, just thinking back on it in later years. From memory she was actually good looking and fairly young, possibly around 30, which was old to me at the time. Now he asks me if I want to see her body. What? He says she's such a heavy sleeper we can pull the blanket down and have a look at her if we want. By this time I'm seriously weirded out and say no thanks. He says I'll show you, and reaches forward and grabs one corner of the blanket and starts pulling. Just as one of her boobs is about to pop into view, I run out of the room, out of the house, then all the way home. Never went to his house again. For some reason the kid hated he after that, and a few years later, when he made friends with another loner, the two of them tried to beat me up, which didn't work well for them. Thinking back, I obviously can't be sure, but I think not only was he weird, so was his mum. I think she may have gotten off on having little boys see her body. I don't think she is really asleep, and I think this wasn't the first time they'd done this, but who knows. Sorry in advance if this is really long. From 1st 7th grade, I would have catechism every Monday night, basically a Catholic religion class that's only about an hour and 15 minutes long. My dad forced me to go into these classes for years, even though I'd tell him repeatedly I had no interest. My mom didn't care if I went or not. You're supposed to go until the end of your 8th grade year, when you get confirmed into Catholicism, but I never went through with it. That's a story for another time. This story was from when I was in 1st grade. So this one Monday night, my dad drops me off at the school next to the church for catechism. This started at 6 p.m. and went until about 7:10 to 7:15 p.m. Once the class had ended, I walked outside the door ready to be picked up, but realized my dad wasn't there. One by one, every classmate starts to leave, until I'm the only one there. It's now 7:45 and the teachers/nurses at the school are trying to comfort me. They take me to the office, where they try to call my mom, who was at work and couldn't answer. I'm fighting back tears at this point, because it's almost 8 p.m. and I'd felt abandoned in this place I wasn't comfortable at. Finally my dad shows up, and we leave. He tells me there was a really bad accident and that's why he was late. I almost could have believed it, but he underestimated the fact that his 6-year-old daughter could recognize the smell of the alcohol that lingered on his breath. I knew there wasn't an accident. He just went to the bar to kill time, got drunk, and forgot to pick me up for nearly an hour. When my mom got home, after listening to the voicemail from the school, she was livid, and I knew by the way she screamed at him. I knew it was faked up, but I didn't realize just how faked up it was until I was a bit older and realized that he willingly put my life at risk like that. Sometimes I still wonder if this was really a thing that happened, but that night I went home and wrote about it in the diary I had. I still have it, and it reminds me why I cut him out of my life. TLDR, my bus driver was a child molester. I remember when I was 8 or 9 we had a substitute bus driver, the same one as we usually had when our normal one couldn't make it, which was fairly frequently, if my memory is correct. He was older. He had a son a year older than I who I played soccer with, and he was a friendly guy. He was no stranger, but he wasn't a close family friend either. One day I remember a few people who were after my stop were all absent or stayed after school, so my stop was the last. We also took a different route because of it. This had also happened before and wasn't unusual. I was sitting in the middle of the bus, now all alone minus the driver, with my head sort of down, when I realized the driver drove past my road. My kid self panicked momentarily, then went up and reminded him I was on the bus and we laughed. He said he hadn't seen me, and he turned around and dropped me off. I remember he was a funny guy, and I had always liked him well enough. Looking back it was a bit odd though. I always talked to him on the bus when I got on. Years later, he messaged me on Facebook. I was in college at that point. He asked me how I'd been and yada yada. I didn't reply. A few months after that message, he committed suicide because he was found guilty of child molestation, molesting little boys. I always wonder if he really didn't know I was on the bus and if it was truly an accident. I'm sure it was, really. It's just a little strange looking back. When I was about 5 I remember my dad waking me up from a deep sleep, throwing me into a back of a car and driving somewhere. A car followed us, and we stopped a motel. Outside was a motorcycle that belonged to my mother's friend. I made a comment and my dad parked. He told me to stay in the car and he knocked on the motel room door. I didn't listen because I thought I was going to see my mom and or her friend. He knocked and didn't realize I was there. My mom answered in just a silk robe and guy ran through the background naked. My dad started chewing her out and I started to cry. Both parents didn't know I was there and looked down at me with horror. I started crying because I was confused why my mom didn't come to snuggle with me. That night began my parents' 2-year-long divorce and 7-year custody battle. As I got older and told someone about this memory, I realized it was my mom cheating. She ended up pregnant with 2 of his kids and they married each other. My mom was a terrible person who gave up her rights to me once because she wanted a new life. Also, she ended up very physically abusive and abusing drugs. She kicked me out 9+ years ago and I haven't seen her or my brother since. The innocence of me being a kid made me miss so many big red flags. Like me meeting her friend she told me we were going to live with. My mom was molested and raped by a family member when she was younger. He was maybe 15+ years older than her. Let's call him Big J, who my mother also walked in on rapping another family member who was only 4 at the time. It is suspected that he's hurt several girls and boys in our family and my mom's old neighborhood in similar ways. When she told her parents, this being the southern US in the 70s, it was swept under the rug and her parents still had him around her, but never left her alone with him. Years later, when I was 7 years old or so, my grandparents have a get together at their home. We now lived in another state from the side of the family Big J belonged to, and I hadn't seen Big J in years, and he's there. He was a towering man, thus the name, obviously changed for this story, but his real name does begin with Big and deaf, so I'd always perceived him to just be different. I never knew he was deaf, so I would still speak to him, as if he could hear me, and just thought he talked funny / could barely talk at all, and had no clue what he'd done to my mother. I remember grabbing his hand and leading him to a room at the back of the house to show him my video games. I remember only a closet light being on in the room and seeing that light bounce off his beady eyes like marbles, and I spoke to him and asked if he wanted to play some Gamma Cube with me. He just had this creepy, knowing smile on his face. I was still holding his hand, totally oblivious. Suddenly my mom walked in, panic on her face. "What are you doing?" I was confused and thought I'd done something wrong. I told her I was just showing Big J my video games. She ushered me out quickly and glared at him. I remembered this incident years later, a few years after she'd told me what he did to her. I'm angry now remembering that she let me out of her sight even for a second, knowing a faking child rapist was in the same house as me, and how I was absolutely a few seconds away from being molested before she came in. She'd left me with my grandparents to go outside several times during this get together, even though she was bitter towards them about never doing anything, and she knew that my grandparents still hung around Big J's parents, my great aunt and my grandmother's sister, the very people who convinced my grandma to let all this stuff go in the first place, and who looked the other way when he molested kids in their own house. At the time, I hadn't yet told her his son, affectionately referred to by the family as Little J, he was also born disabled, though developmentally / mentally, molested me twice a year before, and that my great aunts walked in on that too. Turns out he molested one of my younger cousins as well. Mom actually did something about it this time around, but he only got 2 years in jail for it. He's out now, and Big J's grandmother, Big J's mom, and my great aunt runs a nursery with an apartment above it. Little J lives there despite the fact that he's a registered sex offender and isn't supposed to be remotely close to places with kids like schools and the like. My mother drove by the house and took pics of him entering and turned it into the police, but they said because she didn't have a warrant on them and wasn't a cop, she would get a stalking charge if she didn't stop, and the evidence was disregarded. To this day, he still lives there. TLDR, unknowingly walked the man who rapped my mom as a child into a backroom during a family get together to play video games. She comes in at the last second, probably saving me from also being rapped / molested. Son of rapist molests me, is convicted, but is still allowed to live a floor above a daycare a family member owns. Alcoholic father. Although he had been sober since before I was born. Then, when I was 7, and he was in his early 50s, he had a sort of midlife crisis and started drinking again. Seemed innocuous at first, but it escalated quickly. At the time of this relapse, He had about 19 years of sobriety. And as some of the folks in AA may know, a person's alcoholism continues to grow silently when they are in recovery. So people who relapse after 15 or 20 years often die in the space of a few months. But I didn't know all that when I was 8. After about 3 months, it became clear to my mom that it was a bad idea. She didn't know the half of it in regards to his secret consumption, so they agreed that he would stop drinking. And this information was also passed on to my sisters and me. I was the youngest of 3. So anyway, one day, Pop took me out to spend some quality time together. Looking back, I think he was staying away from home cause things were rocky with mom, and also he wanted to drink. I think maybe we went to get pizza or something. I don't remember. I do remember he was driving kind of fast. After that, we went to a saloon to play pool. I think you know where this is going. I knew what a bar was, and that it was a no-no for Pop. But I didn't know what a saloon was, so I figured it was okay. So we started playing pool. I grew up with a pool table in the house, and it was something Pop and I did together often. I guess I thought it was cool that we went somewhere to play, like, more of an occasion. Funny, since our table at home was really nice, cared for, and level. Way better than bar tables. Pop gets a drink. I watch the lady bartender pour. Looking back, I think he ordered a vodka double. Neat. Looks like water. And at that age, I think I only recognized beer cans as meaning alcohol. Also, looking back, I think I wanted to believe, cause I couldn't handle the idea that my dad was doing something wrong or bad. I asked the woman, is that like dehydrated water or something? I asked. I kicked myself for years over the silliness of that question. She just smiled, thought I was cute. Pop smiled. Everything was fine, I guess. I can't remember how many he ordered. I stopped paying attention to it. Must have been several. I don't know if we were there for an hour or 2, but eventually Pop got a call from mom. I don't think he had a cell phone at that time, so I guess she had been calling bars trying to hunt him down. She told him to bring me home. I don't know what he said on the drive home, but I remember it made me mad at mom for ruining our quality time. Pop is pretty infamous for being passive aggressive and guilt trippy and playing the victim. We stopped at the house. I got out, but he didn't, and the engine was still running. I asked him if he was coming in. He said no. I asked him where he was going. He just said, I don't know, but I don't know. When I went in the house, I was crying, and I berated mom for spoiling the day. She didn't say anything that I recall. I don't think she knew how to handle the situation. Obviously she did the right thing, but there's no way she would have been able to explain the situation to my child mind. It's quite possible that she saved my life, though, because the next morning we found out that Pop was in the hospital. He had been arrested. I don't know the details about that part. He had tried to attack the police and the nurses in the hospital. Due to his reptilian braining drunken stupor. Might want to look up alcohol plus reptilian braining. Also he had a blood alcohol concentration of 0.45. So, pretty lucky he survived. Not just me. He went straight from the hospital to an inpatient treatment center. I remember visiting him once when he was there. Place really creeped me out. He stayed with treatment and AA for a while. He did all the things legally required of him, and he's been sober now for 21 years and counting. He told me, years later, that when he woke up in the hospital, not knowing what had happened the day/night before, what had happened to me, or if he had killed me, or someone else or something, he said that the blood-chilling terror he felt was so strong, that even if he hadn't gone on to do any treatment or meetings or anything, that he never would have touched the bottle again. He was just done. And I believe him. Nowadays, Pop and I are very close, and he has served as an absolutely vital support in my own life for many years. In like 5th grade, a kid had a birthday party at his house. In the evening, some house like a present. I don't quite know who had this or how it started, but it was like a you're growing up event. I remember that a bunch of us kids, boys, were in this big TV room and we straight up watched a hardcore porno. I vividly remember, because that was the first time I learned the dick goes into the bussy and lips wrapped tightly and tightly around, sliding in and out, and not just hot dog in a bun like, and also what a cum shot was. I realized bussy looked amazing. and such must be awesome. That wasn't the weird part. The weird part was his sister was watching with us. She was older, maybe a few years, middle school aged. I think it was her idea, and she set it up thinking about it, watching a hardcore porno with a bunch of little boys and her brother, like it was normal, not taboo or all that secretive. I'm like 10, watching intense graphic sex next to this girl, watching with her brother and a bunch of his friends. I don't know how we were all able to watch it. Where were the parents? My dad eventually picked me up, so it wasn't crazy late or anything, and it was a big party. Yeah, a thread I have a lot to say in. Parents had me smoke weed from 6 to 18. I'd tell my stepmom I didn't want to, and she'd make me do it anyways. Also made me rub her feet. My memory is shit now. Mother used to starve me and siblings. Alcoholic, spent everything on alcohol. Would get in fights with her husband thing and stab him. Usually stab him in the hand, but I think he took it in the hand to protect his body. Hit him with various things as well. I remember growing up, my half sister, didn't live with her, was around 11 to 12, always hanging out with a 24-year-old. He was molesting her. Didn't make sense why an older guy kept hanging out with her. Grandmother used to take a switch to us, thin branch used for striking, that leaves whelps and cuts. I was about 4 to 5 at the time. Used to be pretty badly cut from it. Grandfather always drove drunk everywhere we went with him. Stepmom cooked meth when I was around 14 to 15. Didn't understand why I had to buy pseudoephedrine for her, or why we needed iodine or Coleman's propane, or whatever. Couldn't understand why she was being so hateful and crazy. She'd wake me up at 3 in the morning to get her paper. Had to walk 1/4 mile down the road and back, which wasn't so bad. But why are you going to wake me up, especially when I was having insomnia problems? She karate chopped me in the throat once. Weird. When I was about 7 or 8, I was annoying some older boys. They couldn't have been older than 5th grade, probably in 4th, during recess. Kicking some gravel towards the play equipment they were on, generally being the weird girl who makes dinosaur noises, that kind of thing. Well, one boy finally jumped off the equipment, ran over to me, and stuck his arm down the front of my overalls. He full on grabbed my privates, turned to his friends, and said something like "oh yeah," then withdrew his arm and left. At the time, I was just really confused, and I wandered off. I could see he had just done something to punish me for being annoying, but I didn't understand what it was. I thought maybe it was because underwear is supposed to be private, but I didn't know why anyone would want to touch it. I was embarrassed. When I told my mom on the way home, she stopped the car, did a U-turn, and marched into the principal's office with me. Next day I point out the boy to the vice principal. Vice principal thanks me, walks over to the boy, and that's the last I saw or heard anything about it. It took a long time for me to understand why what happened made my very non-confrontational mom so angry, why the boy did it in the first place, and why all the adults took me so seriously. I sometimes wonder about the little boy, and where he learned to use that kind of behavior as a weapon against others, and where he is now. It's not as bad as what many people have experienced, but it's stuck with me for a very long time. Had a friend in early elementary school who would invite me to her house and take me to the fort in her backyard so we could put the non-pointy end of plastic cutlery up our butts. It was her idea. When I was very young, so young my mom would have to help me take a bath. I really hated it when she washed between my legs. It always stung really bad when the soap touched it. As a teenager this memory bothered me because it doesn't hurt to get soap down there, so what happened to me then to make it hurt so much? Also, when I was very young we lived in San Diego and had a couple of Hispanic nannies. One was a young girl, maybe late teens, early 20s. I have a memory of walking down a cul-de-sac at night holding her hand. It was full of cars and people outside in the yards talking and drinking with loud music playing. I remember her taking me into her house and seeing some people sitting on a couch and then nothing. I have no memories after that. As a teenager I was watching a news report about a guy who had stopped some kids on the way home from school and asked if they wanted a ride. I was startled to hear that the guy drove a car the same model and color we had, and that he had a beard like my dad. As the news reporter said the man was wearing a red shirt, I remember turning my head to see my dad outside starting up the grill. He was wearing a red shirt. I'm pretty sure my 5th grade teacher had slight pedophilic tendencies. Or at the very least, he wildly overestimated our maturity level. The thing that creeps me out the most looking back was how desperately I wanted his attention. I was a good kid and a good student. I didn't have many friends, so I helped the janitor pick up trash at lunch and spent recess picking flowers and giving them to whoever was on yard duty. I was always one of the teacher's favorites, and if I wasn't, I would work harder. So my little 10-year-old mind didn't understand why, no matter what I did, I was completely invisible, while the popular pretty girls got to sit at the table near his desk and were clearly favored. Even back then, I'm average looking at best. Anyways, he did a lot of things that just seemed weird to me at the time, even though I didn't know exactly how wrong they were. Here's a brief list. You know that there's a place in France where the naked ladies dance song? He would sing that over and over and over. At least twice every day he would sing or hum it at some point. I told my mom about the aforementioned song. She told me it was disgusting. I went back to school, and when he sung it, I said that my mom said it was disgusting, and he went off on me about how I shouldn't be telling my parents about what happened in that class. It was a sort of snitches get stitches message mixed with a what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas vibe. Pretty sure his exactly words were something similar. Like, what happens in room 14 stays in room 14. I felt awful and guilty as hell for telling my mom, because I didn't like breaking rules. There's always sexual songs in pop culture, and kids who don't understand what it means will always love them. That's to be expected. What's not to be expected is the teacher going along with this and singing along and playing the songs that were just wrong on repeat. His favorites seemed to be Nothing on You and California Girls. For context, this was in California and he was singing it to the girls. He would flirt with anything that moved. This isn't really inappropriate, just weird. He went on a rant at the beginning of the year and a few times later on about how he'd been accused of playing favorites. He warned us that saying that was the fastest way to piss him off and insisted that he did not play favorites. Spoiler alert, he did. He also told us that if we brought him an apple or a cutesy sign or another typical teacher gift, he was throwing it in the trash. Which is just kind of a dick move. We had table groups, and as I mentioned in the long-winded backstory, he would seat people according to his preferences. The pretty girls sat in the table group near him. I always got placed closer to the door. Said pretty girls were almost like co-teachers. They helped make the seating charts and assigned partners for square dancing. Long story. They always abused this power, and since they hated me, I ended up square dancing some guy who'd smelled like Bo since 2nd grade and had no concept of personal hygiene. Seriously, he once sneezed into his hand and then offered it to me. He seemed to have an endless supply of toys and trinkets in his desk. Once every month he would clean out his desk, giving the pretty girls who sat near him a lot of little treats and gifts, while ignoring the rest of the classroom. He did have a few male favorites. He called them his wingmen. Unlike the girls, these were the few students that were somewhat helpful to him. One favorite was good with computers. Forget what the others were useful for. This was a long time ago. We opened our history workbooks 3 times that year maximum. He hated social studies, so he just didn't teach it. I later went on to be harassed in a different school because I hadn't learned the geography or basic information we were supposed to learn. Again, not really creepy, just faked up in a different way. He was the basketball coach, the girls' basketball coach, which isn't weird on its own, but combined with everything else on this list, it's concerning. As he was a basketball coach, and apparently a good one, based on the trophies he never shut up about, he would usually throw crumpled up papers across the room into the trash can, then make the students clean it up. One day he decided to switch it up and threw the crumpled up paper at a girl's ass, with his wingman sitting by his side instead. He then loudly proclaimed, "Damn it, I missed because your butt's too small." When I timidly said something about how you don't say that about a girl, he loudly retorted with, "What, do you want me to say she has a big butt?" I pretty quickly wimped out because I was a faking coward who couldn't handle defying authority figures, no matter how faked up they were. This girl was 10, 11 at maximum. He had a barbecue and a fixation with hot dogs. He would make them every chance he got and would give them to his favorites, the pretty girls, first. One time the winds outside were so strong that they issued a tornado warning and told everyone to stay inside for lunch, which freaked everybody the fuck out because this is California. We don't get tornado ever. After a little while, he proclaims that if a tornado was going to happen, it would have already happened. No, the alert had not been lifted yet. So he goes outside and BBQs hot dogs in the middle of a faking tornado warning. He wouldn't give everybody hot dogs, even though he had like 3 12 packs and there were like 25 students in the class, saying it was only for the people who couldn't get lunch from the cafeteria. Okay, fine. He then proceeds to give a couple to the hot lunch kids, and then the rest go to the favorites. In 5th grade, everybody watched a puberty video. The girl's video was called I Got It, and was about a mom making pancakes in the shape of ovaries and comparing the batter to menstrual blood. It was unnecessarily disturbing, and it was a year before I ate pancakes again, but that's besides the point. The point is that everybody knew about the video months before being shown it, and not because word got around. It was because, as a funny story, the teacher would talk about the time where, when presented with extra time at the end of the boys' sex ed class, he chose to play the girls' video with the hope that they would see something good. He then went on to talk about how the boys were grossed out. This was a funny anecdote that he would regularly reference. In the yearbook, there were 3 class pictures. One for boys, one for girls, and one co-ed. The teacher made a big deal about how the girls had to wear dresses and skirts, then would talk about how pretty they were, then as an afterthought, how all the boys should wear ties. Then when we got the yearbooks, I noticed, in the boy's picture, he had his arms crossed, looking goofy and like he was trying to seem tough. In the girl's photo he was standing behind them, and had his arms and face raised towards the sky in a sort of hallelujah pose. A few more things he did that weren't creepy as much as they just made him seem like a dick. He would regularly tell stories about his mom, sister, and any other woman in his life. Not a problem, except that he would use this nasally, whinny voice for every single woman in his stories. Even for his mother. This was a middle-aged man. During Women's History Month, we learned about historical women, and he would regularly make comments about how it was a man's world. My most clear memory of this was the librarian reading a story about the woman who invented bloomers. One of the lines was something along the lines of back then, men were in control of everything. He loudly went yeah, and high-fived the nearest guy. He also told a story about how women were awful and makeup is deceptive, saying how he once went to his girlfriend's house early in the morning to take her to breakfast, then described in graphic detail exactly how hideous she was without her makeup. There's more. There's so much more. Like the keychain of a hula dancer with a grass skirt just barely covering her hoo-ha and hand cupping her boobs that he would show off. Or the talking Yoda he used as a co-teacher. Or the scrapbook I hand drew of that Yoda that he shoved into his drawer and forgot about until the next year. But I've already spent like 45 minutes typing this all out, and it's just going to be one of thousands of comments, and is so long it'll just be scrolled by anyways. But if anyone does read this and has questions, just comment or something and I'll elaborate. Oh, and here's the kicker. He can't be fired. He's tenured. And last time I checked, he is now the vice principal, and I can't submit a complaint to the school district without giving my own personal information and agreeing to meet with the teacher I'm complaining about. My mom and dad divorced when I was 6, and it was ugly. My mom got custody of but she would let me visit him every few months ago. I was a daddy's girl and he filled my head with so much fluff. I wanted to live with just him. As the years went on, I saw him less and less, and I didn't know why. As I got older, I noticed how more and more often, his calls became more and more slurred. He slept for most of the time I was there visiting him, but I didn't care, because I could watch whatever I wanted on TV. He would let me watch Oz when I was 11, and took me to see the South Park movie around the same time. He slept during most of the movie, anyway. He had a crippling drug problem, and I had no idea, and it didn't make sense, until I was much older. The trips to the New Orleans to score rocks in the 90s, mind you, the ducking in the middle of cooking spaghetti, the loss of my jewelry every time I went to his house, he stole it, the funny smell from whatever he was smoking as I lay on his chest watching television, it was crack, the time spent in jail. He died of a drug overdose when I was 13. I hated my mother growing up because she was my disciplinarian, all the while I had an angel beside me the whole time. My older sister saw a lot more than I did and knew what was going on. She's pretty faked up from it all. My mom waited until she felt I was old enough to handle the information and let me be a kid. I'm forever thankful to her for that. Oof, geez, it feels awful to talk about this, but I should get it off of my chest. So here we go. Reddit. When I was 8 or 9, my mom put me in a Bible camp during the time I was off school, so I'd have something to do during the summer months. It was in this huge old church school type building, and it had a playground in the front yard with a pink plastic playhouse off to the side. Stuff was nice. There was a hepatitis B outbreak there once, but the food was good. I partially enjoyed it. There was a boy there, his name was Jaden, and he was 11 or 12. He was the only kid who talked to me, and I was a really shy weird kid, so I was super grateful. We hung out every day I had to go to camp, and did most of the activities together. He made sexual jokes often, and I laughed along, because I had no idea what the heck they cold meant. I tried to like him as just a friend, but he always wanted more. I felt weird around him, and never really knew why. Later in the summer, his actions began to get stranger. He would act like we were husband and wife, and kiss me all the time, when the supervisors weren't looking. It was so awkward, but he would tell the adults that I hurt him if I didn't go along with his plans. So being the paranoid kid I was, I had to. This vulnerability led to even more things, like that one time where we were making blanket forts, and he laid on the ground and asked me to sit on him. I can still faintly remember how weird it was staring down at him, and I actually just got shivers from it right now. But the worst was still yet to come. A week or so before the summer ended, when we were playing outside in the front yard, he asked me to go behind the playhouse with him. I thought nothing of it. He was being his normal self that day, and hadn't pulled anything, so it felt safe. God, was I wrong? I regret making the one choice that eternally faked up my childhood. When we both crouched behind the playhouse, he did horrible things I'd rather not put into text. I can't even think about them without getting a heavy nauseating feeling in my stomach. Skipping the god-awful sexual assault part, let's just say I have severe commitment issues, and won't go anywhere with anyone alone, unless I've known them for years. Thinking back on it after that entire incident, he eventually left camp to go to high school. I hated going there, and cried every morning I was forced to go, but I never truly realized why, until the memories came back to me quite recently. God, I hope Jaden is living his worst live right now. I hate him. Fuck you, Jaden. When I was 6 or 7, my mom dressed me up for Halloween as a powder puff girl, or that's what she called it. She put me in white thigh highs, a little short pink skirt, matching blouse, a pair of her old school shoes. She was having a blast, smoking meth while she dressed me up. She especially had fun putting makeup on me, mascara, lipstick, the works. She even made me wear a pair of white cotton panties. She made me take a couple hits off her meth pipe, then have a few sips of Jack Daniels, which almost made me throw up. Then we just sat there for a long time. I was getting antsy to go trick or treating, even though I wasn't going to score much, not in the neighborhood where we lived. It was late when someone knocked on our motel room door. Mom let in an older man I had never seen before, and they whispered for a few minutes. They kept glancing over at me, the man licking his lips and grinning at me each time. After a few minutes, my mom started gathering up some of her stuff and stuffing it in her shoulder bag. She grabbed me by the neck and told me I had better mind the man or else I said I would, and she let go of me. I didn't care who took me out for candy, as long as I got some. The man had been staring at me the whole time, and his hand was shaking as he waved my mom out the door. She got halfway through when the whole front lit up with red and blue flashing lights. The parking lot of our motel blocked by several police cars, and cops were walking up the walkway. Mom ducked inside just as the cops passed our room. They stopped next door and started banging on the door. The man got up and started freaking out, making my mom hold him back, doing her best to convince the man to stay, telling him to just keep me quiet however he needed. He declined and left a few minutes later. Mom whipped me with a belt for faking up her night and told me I wasn't getting any candy. Years later I realized she had been trying to pimp me out. It's more of its potential to be faked up, and I never realized it. I lived in an apartment complex from birth 9. There were basement apartments and upper apartments. Daddy Dean, what he liked to be called, lived in a basement apartment alone. He was very nice, always polite, and let us apartment kids play/climb on his truck. He always had candy for us. If we ever tried to hug him, he would say no. He never got mad or impatient with us kids. He was also very clear that if we were going to talk to him when he got home, it had to be on ground level, never the stairs leading down to his apartment or anywhere near it. One day, an older girl and us were playing, and he beckoned us over, still ground floor where anyone can see us. He said he was moving. We honestly tried not to cry and begged him not to. He then asked if we wanted a surprise, and when we said yes, he disappeared inside of his apartment and came back with a black velvet display box that had little containers of what I now know are semi-precious jewels, colorful pretty stones. He told us we could pick one. Older girl picked what I think was a sapphire and I picked a ruby. He smiled and told us they were good choices and gave them to us. Told us we were very nice and sweet girls. He moved 2 days later. When my parents saw the ruby, they freaked out, demanding to know where I got it, who gave it to me. I told them Daddy Dean. They got pale. I explained everything, but I don't know if they believed me or not. We never brought it up again. Well, it went missing, and I realized they freaking pawned it. Looking back, I really want to believe he was just a lonely guy who liked kids. None of the adults ever said anything about him being creepy, and of course I don't remember him being creepy. Oh boy, I have a wealth of those. Amazingly, my childhood still ended up being pretty innocent. I was a pretty naive kid and didn't notice these things at the time. Years later, upon reflection, I realized how bad they really were. My mum had a friend whose 3 daughters were teenagers when I was about 3 to 4. They said they thought I was the cutest thing and often begged my mum to let them take me to the park and stuff. Innocent enough. They seemed like sweet girls at the time to my mum. Keep in mind that as horrible as a lot of these things are, they made sure that they took me somewhere genuinely kid friendly for the rest of the day so that I'd only recount the good stuff to my parents later. They'd coach me on what to tell my parents later too. Lots of our little secret, and that would be so cool of you, kiddo. Some of these could have happened on the same day. I'm not sure. Keep in mind I was very young. One time, they did take me to the park. Kind of. They took me to the part that didn't have rides, that just had a graffiti covered derelict building that stank of pee and had used needles everywhere. They went to meet up with one of their drug dealer boyfriends, which eventually ended up with the younger girl, 14, having a fight with another girl she caught with her boyfriend. Scratched the other girl's face really bad. Saw a bloodied screwdriver before someone covered my eyes, and definitely witnessed some inappropriate fondling. Still don't quite understand the situation. Another time, they took me to a newsagent. Left me to browse the magazines while they shoplifted. They got caught and kicked out. I ran out after them, frightened, and the shop owner knocked me over by accident. In the shouting match that was to follow, the middle girl managed to sneak around and yank down the jeans of the shopkeeper. He wasn't wearing underwear. First time I saw a business. The girls knocked him over while tangled in his jeans, tightened his belt around his knees, and tried grabbing his dick, balls, as etc. while laughing. Basically physically and sexually assaulted the guy. Picked me up and ran away when they heard sirens. They took me to a house. Don't know where. Older adult male there seemed to own the place. Gave me a lighter to play with while he took one of the girls into another room to screw, which I only now know because I thought she was being hurt at the time due to her moaning. He gave her money and we all left. He grabbed me roughly as we were leaving to get his cheap plastic lighter back. I was sad because I thought I'd been given a sparky toy. To cheer me up, they took me to see horses at a local farm, where I almost lost a finger while feeding them grass. Oh boy, I have a wealth of those. Amazingly, my childhood still ended up being pretty innocent. I was a pretty naive kid and didn't notice these things at the time. Years later, upon reflection, I realized how bad they really were. My mum had a friend whose 3 daughters were teenagers when I was about 3 to 4. They said they thought I was the cutest thing and often begged my mum to let them take me to the park and stuff. Innocent enough. They seemed like sweet girls at the time to my mum. Keep in mind that as horrible as a lot of these things are, they made sure that they took me somewhere genuinely kid friendly for the rest of the day so that I'd only recount the good stuff to my parents later. They'd coach me on what to tell my parents later too. Lots of our little secret, and that would be so cool of you, kiddo. Some of these could have happened on the same day, I'm not sure. Keep in mind I was very young. One time, they did take me to the park. Kind of. They took me to the part that didn't have rides, that just had a graffiti covered derelict building that stank of pee and had used needles everywhere. They went to meet up with one of their drug dealer boyfriends, which eventually ended up with the younger girl, 14, having a fight with another girl she caught with her boyfriend. Scratched the other girl's face really bad. Saw a bloodied screwdriver before someone covered my eyes, and definitely witnessed some inappropriate fondling. Still don't quite understand the situation. Another time, they took me to a newsagent. Left me to browse the magazines while they shoplifted. They got caught and kicked out. I ran out after them, frightened, and the shop owner knocked me over by accident. In the shouting match that was to follow, the middle girl managed to sneak around and yank down the jeans of the shopkeeper. He wasn't wearing underwear. First time I saw a business. The girls knocked him over while tangled in his jeans, tightened his belt around his knees, and tried grabbing his dick, balls, as etc. while laughing. Basically physically and sexually assaulted the guy, picked me up, and ran away when they heard sirens. They took me to a house. Don't know where. Older adult male there seemed to own the place. Gave me a lighter to play with while he took one of the girls into another room to screw, which I only now know because I thought she was being hurt at the time due to her moaning. He gave her money and we all left. He grabbed me roughly as we were leaving to get his cheap plastic lighter back. I was sad because I thought I'd been given a sparky toy. To cheer me up, they took me to see horses at a local farm, where I almost lost a finger while feeding them grass. They taught me some rhyme thing with a dance. Dance ended with me lifting my dress or shirt and thrusting. Had me perform this for their mostly male friends and for the previous dude at that house I mentioned. I showed my dad once and he was pissed. But I couldn't remember where I learned it from by then, and he couldn't do anything. He had no idea these girls were taking me out at this point because he worked a 9 to 5 and didn't know I wasn't with my mum 24/7. They took me to a graveyard to meet some of their friends. Made me try beer. I hated it and cried. Got pissy with me when I wanted to go home, and one of their friends poured beer on me and my nice yellow dress. The girls freaked out and took me home to bathe me so that my mum wouldn't smell it. Except their mum caught them and said they couldn't bathe a stranger's kid and to just put some perfume on me instead to cover up the smell. Sprayed me with so much perfume that I had an asthma attack and their mum had to call my mum. They made me tell my mum that I spilled the perfume on myself by accident. Threatened to tell her I'd been a naughty girl if I didn't. This was threat enough to 4-year-old me. My mum paid them for the spilled perfume. We were really poor at the time and I now know mum probably had to go without something to pay for that. I later told the truth. Have no idea what the outcome was, but I know a lot of adults stopped talking to each other over it. They took me to a random old dude's house to look at his budgies. Guy had about 30 birds, must have been breeding them. They gave me a cage, told me to pick a bird and take it home. My first pet. Mum was pissed. She's allergic and they knew this. They thought it would be funny. I had to give up the budgie. In a similar vein, they once brought a kitten to our house to give to me. My dad was allergic. They told me it was because he was mean and didn't want me to have a cat. Little me was so pissed at my dad for that. Turns out they were trying to sell it to my mum and they were pissed off because they couldn't get the money. The kitten already belonged to someone. They found it in a garden and were just trying to make money. Side note that I don't know which animal was given to my first. I have both distinct memories, but I'm not sure of the order. One might have been revenge for the other. Took me on a bus to the city. They weren't supposed to take me out of the village. Nothing super terrible happened. Just took me to a market to look around and show me to people they knew. Mostly old ladies one of them worked with who thought I was cute. It was this event that tipped my mum off that they were doing things they shouldn't though, as a friend of hers saw them with me and told her. They lost interest in me around the time I started school. My mum didn't know how bad these girls were at the time until a couple years later when the oldest became a known prostitute and started taking hard drugs. She also had 2 babies, which were each taken away. I remember my mum telling me that if I ever see that girl or her sisters, I was to stay away and not let them take me anywhere. I was around 7 by then. Asked my mum about it when I was in my early 20s. Turns out that the first baby was taken from her for neglect, but she was caught trying to sell the second one after her boyfriend/pimp had been sexually abusing the infant. Did some prison time for it. The oldest tried to add me on Facebook a few weeks ago after finding me through my uncle. I was warned that she's trying to get someone to let her and her daughter live with them. Daughter is too young to be either of the 2 that were taken from her. Her 2 younger sisters seem to have straightened out a bit and gotten jobs and families. But I know all 3 have been prostitutes at some point and 2 of them have been in prison. I was friends with this girl in kindergarten. I'll call her Welby and I love to play. We played hide and seek. The ground is lava, gymnastics, make believe. Normal 6-year-old girl things. For some reason B loved to play make believe with me. I usually loved it too, however B would force me to be the boy saving her from some impending danger. I always had to be the boy. She was very particular about that. I would beg her to please let me be the girl this time, but she would get really upset and cry, and me being a calm kid didn't like drama of any kind. I would give in instantly to 1 tear. After I would do my hero saving routine, B had another thing we specifically just had to do. We called it the pages roll. It was basically our legs in 2 V shapes with our feet together, and we would roll down a hill, or just in a straight line. Here's an example of our legs no matter what. Eventually after a few tumbles our legs would end up intertwined, and we would be really close together. It was whatever. I remember thinking it was kind of fun, but not when I would get hurt from one of her limbs smashing on mine, or when I would end up with her whole body on top of me. As a little kid it was annoying, but I didn't feel like anything was wrong. We would always end laughing hysterically. That is until one day B had a new idea for us. We were now going to take off all of our clothes and do the roll we had perfected. She kept pushing for us to just take off our clothes and do it. I mean, it wasn't necessarily wrong, I thought, but I really didn't want her naked body flying on top of mine, which I knew would happen. Well, yeah, I called my mom to pick me up. Because that wasn't happening I didn't realize why I didn't like it, but I knew it was weird. B was nice, but I didn't want to pages roll with her anymore. Especially not naked. We never played outside of school after that. And yes, she turned out to be into girls. She had a stint of pulling her eyebrows out throughout middle and high school. She was a nice girl. I guess it just freaked me out being a 6-year-old. Not so bad, but something I feel like writing up. When I was in 1st grade, maybe 2nd, I was invited to a classmate's birthday party. I didn't know the girl, and in fact I really knew no one in the class. I was a year younger than everyone else, and was shy. We lived on a secluded road about a mile outside of town, so I never had any playmates, and had never gone over anyone's house before, not even cousins or even older relatives besides my grandmother on rare occasions. I had older siblings, and my experience there was that other children were dangerous, so I mostly kept to myself. So I was very reluctant to go. Actually, the way I remember it is that I heard you were supposed to bring a present, and I had none, so when my mother tried to drop me off I resisted. She claimed that no one would notice, but I had never been to a party before, and felt that I would be called out for being empty-handed. That is my memory, but disputed. She claimed that the gift had nothing to do with it. I actually had not thought of this for 40 years, and then one day my mother used this as an proof that I was always a problem child. This is the part that fits in with the question, since I had never thought of this incident once in all those years. Once she brought it up though, well, what do you say? Now, understand that I went off to school and did other things. I understood that I had to do things. The problem wasn't that I refused to go or anything, but that I was crying and not acting happy on the drive over. I was ordered to stop crying, but couldn't. I was scared. She said I could not go if I was crying. So my mother cured my fear by taking me to an orphanage and giving me a choice, the party or the orphanage. Now there was one of those old Depression era state hospitals nearby that was now a mental hospital, the kind of setup with acres of rolling green lawn and trimmed shrubs, where you drive the long road past the red brick / white trimmed neoclassical outbuildings and the occasional group of mental patients tending to the flower beds and torturing cats, whatever. I still remember her taking me down the long road to the main building, all the way telling me she was done with me and I was now an orphan. That was it. Too timid to go to a stranger's party without a gift, so she really had no other choice. As she drove, she listed all the things that I would never see again. Of course, she had me begging for forgiveness and pleading for mercy in the end. I agreed to go to the party without a gift and like it. The funny bit is that she brought this up after all those years. I had completely forgotten about it, but she brought it up to support her argument that I was always a chore. She claimed that even when I was a kid she had to take me to the orphanage to keep me in line, otherwise I would not be obedient. This wasn't the only time, but it is the one that got her all the way up the drive to the big building with white columns and dark red doors. After that, she would just drive past and ask me if I was going to obey or if she had to turn in 6 years old, and she made it clear that my world, my life, was on a razor's edge. One mistake, or one unsuppressed sob, and I would be tossed in society's trash heap. That is what my life was worth to her and the family. All the beatings my stepmother gave me for being bad. Later on I learned I did things kids do, but between the belt, extension cord, 2x4, whatever was close by, she would ground me for months on end and always find something new to keep me grounded, right before I was about to serve out her sentence. Early on when I was younger, she would make me stand in the corner for days on end. Force me to get up out Bark's bed, eat a bowl of cereal and just stand in the corner, face to the wall with my hands behind my back for weeks. I'm sure I broke a month before. In my teen years, she somehow justified stripping my walls and room bare with nothing but my clothes and my bed in my room. She would not let me read, write, draw, listen to music. Just nothing for weeks. When my family went out on the boat she forced me to stay on the boat while everyone around me had a great time. And all of this is because I wouldn't bend to her will. I'm not 100% sure why she did this to us, save for the burden of caring for another woman's children as she had 2 of her own when she married my father. She treated my stepsister the same. Her children though, including my half brother, never seemed to find themselves grounded or wanting for anything. I still remember the first time she faked me up. I was 6. She called me in for dinner, and I didn't want to lose the salamanders I'd gathered, so I tried to sneak them by her. She made me show her what was in my hands. After I told her I don't have anything, realized I'd lied, and whipped my ass with the belt, and made me stand in the corner for 2 days. This is an average example of me being bad as a child. I never realized it was bad until I thought back on it as a grown-up. I've since confronted her about more than just this. She completely denied everything and acted appalled when I accused her of it and asked why she treated me like that. We didn't talk for about 6 months until I missed my father enough to eat my pride and visit, and ever since she's been overly nice to me, taking my side in arguments, stuff like that. I can never forgive her, and I'll never say I do for her sake, but I tolerate her company because I don't want to lose the ability to visit my father. He also denied a lot, and all of my siblings have stuck up for me. I know he enabled my stepmother, but I know my real mother, and she's been a raging heroin addict since before I was born, somehow still alive, but under the influence of every pharmaceutical narcotic she can get her hands on, and I have no desire to invite her into my life, just to have a parent to go to when I miss my family. So in truth I tolerate both of them and their lies, asking myself why the entire time. And I still don't know. Mom denied me medical treatment. I had allergies and asthma from infancy, but she refused to have me treated pharmaceutically because she thought the inhalers would make me fat, and I have allergies too, and I don't need medicine, so why do you need it? Dad snuck me into a doctor the Friday before Memorial Day when I was 8.5 for inhalers. They would only refill the prescriptions every couple of months because they thought the instructions were bullshit. My life was one long moderate asthma attack until I was 17, when I had a catastrophic attack and took an ambulance ride to the ER, and my parents were forced to be more proactive. Mom backhanded me for asking permission to take showers at night instead of in the morning. When I sat down and cried I shock, she grabbed me by the ankle and dragged me to my room. She apologized a few hours later and thought that was good enough. Dad beat our ass whenever he was in a mood. Mom and Dad would have screaming matches while we hid under the kitchen table. Then Mom would storm out and stay away for several hours while Dad went to their bedroom and left us to fend for ourselves. Dad was / is a hoarder. This didn't help the asthma / allergy issue. We weren't allowed to have anyone over because of the mess. Mom cleaned once a year, usually the night before Christmas Eve. Mom deliberately neglected us. When we were in college she said she wished she could have been closer to us when we were little, but she couldn't because she had to make sure we'd grown to be independent people. Joke's on her. My sister and I both have diagnosed abandonment issues and are severely codependent. Our babysitter was allowed to smoke around us. Again, asthma. Her oldest son, 6 months older than I, would lock my sister and me in his room with him and make us strip for him. Everyone thought he was my first boyfriend, but he was just my first molester. My mom used to dress me up like a skank, wearing short, skin-tight clothes she thought was cute, but I was so uncomfortable in. I would cry to get her to let me change, but she wouldn't have it. I was an introverted child who preferred to read than go out and play with the apartment kids, and once she grounded me from reading for the day, put me in a sports bra and shorts, and made me go outside and ride my skates alone. I was 9 or 10, and before I had any boobs. I don't know if she liked putting me in uncomfortable situations. I started to wonder if she was trying to get me wrapped. When I was 13 she let me streak my hair blonde for a band concert. I didn't realize it made me look older, but a lot of people commented on it. After the concert, with my hair done, and my mom having me in heavy makeup. This guy who worked at this taco place we frequented thought I was older and would flirt with me, even though I had no interest in the opposite sex quite yet. She would encourage it and never corrected the dude that I was only 13. Every time we ordered for pickup, she'd have me go in and pick up the food, even though I expressed that it was weird and I didn't like going in there. Same year, we were heavily involved in our local church, and it was the job of the older kids to make the younger ones feel welcome. One of the older guys was 16 to my 13, and he was just very friendly, and he was cute, but again, I had no time for boys. Especially since that age difference was weird. Dude was a junior in high school, and I was still in middle school, but somehow my mom would tell me he liked me, and that I should let him know I was interested. My mom would brag that she lost her virginity when she was 12. I think she was disappointed that I wasn't following in her footsteps. When I was little I was unaware that my parents were on crack. They'd go into their bedroom and lock the door and leave me to my own devices for hours at a time. Every time I knocked on their door to ask for food, or if they were coming out soon, they'd reply with 10 minutes. And I'd wait and wait and wait. I didn't think anything was odd about their behavior. When I was 7 my brother's friend came over. He was 10. My brother wasn't home that day, but somehow this boy ended up sleeping over. I was on the top bunk, and he was on the bottom bunk. At some point he reached up and took one of my pillows, a pillow that was special to me. I got out of bed and asked him for it back, and he told me I could have it if I played truth or dare, but only dares. I agreed and thought nothing of it. His first dare was for me to take off all my clothes. After that he told me if I couldn't think of anything I could just say ditto. I didn't really know what was going on and just wanted my pillow to sleep, so every time he dared me I did it and then said ditto. I don't remember everything that I was asked, but I do remember at one point he told me to lick his butt, and since he wasn't looking I just licked my hand and touched his butt and he was convinced. That's the last thing I remember before searching the room for my nightgown and going back to bed. A few days later he walked by me on the street and said very quietly, "I'm sorry I was weird the other night." I waited over 10 years before I told my parents because at first I wasn't sure what happened, and then after that I wasn't sure if what he did was a normal thing and thought I wasn't supposed to feel weird about it. The arguing. My parents argued seldomly, and that was bad enough, but my grandparents lived upstairs, and pretty much their entire daily conversation was one big shouting match. It was never physically violent, but it would be things like, he would say something about how he just wanted some peace and quiet. She would reply loudly, and then he would defend himself loudly, and then it would get quiet, and she would resume daily life, as though nothing had happened, until it happened again maybe 20 minutes later. I learned as I got older and did not require supervision, which was solely her responsibility, while my mom was at work and I was not in school yet. I learned, at any rate, to dissociate from it, to go into a mental space where it was not happening. This was most likely the cause of the dissociative identity disorder which I was diagnosed with at age 15, since it started before I was born and just went on. Their behavior. I would stay downstairs and tune them out with loud music at times, but that would also get my grandma's attention, and she would often come downstairs demanding my attention, not giving me any time to mentally or physically be doing what I wanted to do, attention monopolizing. So if I stayed quiet and simply laid down and zoned out, that was my best recourse until I was old enough to leave the house alone. It sucks majorly, since later in life before they died, they both developed dementia and Alzheimer's. Each one had one of those. I really do not place blame on my grandfather. He was very agoraphobic. They both had very few friends outside of family and were home constantly after he retired. She never worked outside the home. Yet I can't bring myself to hate my grandmother. It's odd like that. They also had a son, my uncle, mom's brother, who showed symptoms of paranoia and, while he lived independently and worked full-time, would show up to get money from them very often and would oftentimes go into very rageful states at them. If they complained about his needing money, they always gave in, and the amounts that they gave him went into the tens of thousands. My mom really tried and was an awesome person, but she literally had to work over full-time hours. Once my parents divorced, and when I was a teen in school, before I got a job, or we would have all lost our home. My dad is still issueful because he is an alcoholic. Parents divorced when I was 12, and that in itself was actually a good event. I was relieved when it happened, because he would go off for days and then come slinking back guiltfully, and it would be a round of tension everywhere. My mom was one who bore her pain quietly, but you could feel it in the air. I'm still very close to my mom, and I do see my dad regularly, but the memories of my grandparents are not as unscathed as they could have been. 3 memories here. First, my father used to be the nicest guy in the world. Any lady that was broken down on the side of the road he would pull over to help, give them money for gas, and exchange numbers in case they needed anything else in the future. My mom was always with us, and I used to wonder why she was so upset about my dad being such a decent person. I later found out my father was a cheater, drunk, and drug abuser. The second was when we'd pick my dad up from visiting the horses on the farm. He'd always stumble out of the door, sometimes happy, sometimes really mad. We went for years, but I never saw any horses. I was always excited to see a horse and thought for sure one day I'd see one. Turns out it was a horse betting at OTB in New York. The third is the many unplanned and last-minute vacations. We'd go to Montauk, New York City, Washington, D.C., or anywhere within a reasonable driving distance. Every time we'd come back home a house would be ransacked, or even worse. One time there was a giant hole in the wall to gain access. 2 out of the 10 plus times a dog was killed. My parents said it was because they accidentally got out while being taken care of. Later during my parents' divorce hearing, when I was 15, I learned that my father was in deep with the Russian mob in New York. Even then it didn't hit me. Finally in my mid-20s I realized what the hell actually happened. Bonus story, my father bought my brother a brand new BMW in the early 90s. My brother drove it for exactly 2 weeks before my father told him to just leave it at our family business and to ride home with us in the van. The next day we pulled in, and the car was blown up, still smoking, in the parking lot. Weird. I was at a pool party when I was about 10, 23 now, and this kid who was much bigger than me held me underwater near the point of drowning. Until about 6 months ago, I always remembered it as the kid just playing too rough and quitting once realized he was hurting me. I shared this with my dad, who was there with me, and his recollection was far different. He says that he too thought the kid was just playing around at first, but once came over to stop it. He made eye contact with the kid. He claims that he could immediately tell from the kid's face that he was intentionally drowning me and was getting pleasure from the whole thing. Once he realizes this, he picks the kid up and hurls him away, then pulls me onto the concrete. Of course this is when the kid's shitty parents decide to come over and scream at my dad for throwing their son around and not so subtlety inferring that they couldn't care less if the kid had drowned me. I don't remember this part because I was laying on the concrete coughing up water and trying not to black out. By this point my dad was just done with them and the whole situation and carries me to the car and leaves. In the car he tells me that he doesn't want me to get anywhere near the kid, but never told me exactly why, which is probably why I never connected any maliciousness to the situation. The prolonged lack of oxygen going to my brain probably had something to do with it too. So after my dad tells me all this, I decide to look the kid up and see what became of him. Turns out he is in jail for, you guessed it, murder. I don't really know the background of the murder that put him in jail, because this revelation freaked me the fuck out, and I had no desire for further research, but I don't think it's outrageous to say that my dad probably saved me from becoming this psychopath's first kill. My mother having several men over each night and they all would go to her room and lock the door only coming out so often. And I remember the open mouth look she had, and the smell of incense which bothers me to the day. When I smell them after a few years of this, I realized they were doing crack cocaine. This was the 90s, and they were having sex with multiple partners and even sharing needles. She eventually almost lost us kids, and she quit cold turkey, and moved us away from the area, and sheared all contact with those people. She found my stepfather, and turned her life around becoming a model parent. And now for the cruel fate of my story. Years later she got pregnant at 40, and after some tests she discovered she was HIV positive, and in fact my dad may have learned of his own positive status before hanging himself in our basement, of which I was the unfortunate one to discover him. To add even more salt to our grief wounds, my 15-year-old sister died a month later due to a rare liver disorder, so our very family had to put up with things I hope no one ever has to endure. To keep this from being a super sad only post, all of us children are HIV free, and she takes retrovirals and her numbers have been low, and she is the strongest person I know. We don't treat her any different, and she will probably live a long healthy life. We do try to keep it amongst our family though, because HIV causes extreme discomfort among those who are uniformed. Sorry for the long post. I have never talked about this on any open discussion. TLDR, mom was having crack and drug filled orgies and paid the price with HIV, but turned her life around. When I was 4 or 5 years of age, my dad loaded me into the car late one night and drove us the 15 minutes from our home in the country to a 24-hour gas station in town to purchase cigarettes. No big deal. Except for the fact that my mother had done a fabulous job of hiding my dad's alcoholism from me. Looking back, I can now confidently say that he was drunk that night, carelessly speeding down dark, twisting back roads with his young daughter unsecured in the front seat. Thankfully, we reached the gas station in one piece. I asked my dad if he would buy me a treat inside, and he promised he would. I remember feeling immediately upset when he came back to the car seemingly empty-handed, no candy bar or ice cream cone in sight. I reminded him that he promised to get me something, and he assured me that he had. He packed his freshly purchased cigarettes and removed one from the box. He taught me how to properly hold it between two fingers and lit it for me. He instructed me on how to take a drag, getting irritated when I didn't inhale into my lungs correctly, even after attempting to 3 or 4 times. I told him I didn't think I liked it very much, and that he could finish the rest. He called me ungrateful, which made me feel bad. I thought he was lashing out, because I had hurt his feelings by not appreciating the gift he had bought for me. I don't know why this memory has stuck with me so clearly, but when it popped into my mind many years later I realized how faked up it was to give your kid a cigarette and try to teach them how to smoke. Not to mention the whole driving drunk without even bothering to put your kid in a booster seat, let alone fasten their seatbelt. There was also the time he asked me if I would like to go pick flowers to give to my mom. Of course I said yes. He took me to the local cemetery. We stole flowers people had purchased for their loved ones' graves. I feel like I should have known it was wrong, but I didn't. When mom found out where her beautiful bouquet of flowers had came from, she was so upset she cried. I didn't understand why at the time until, again, this memory popped back into my mind years later. I was staying with a family friend while my parents were away for the week. I was 11 at the time, and the family friend had 2 daughters who was 2.5 years and like 7 years older than me. I used to go to school with the younger daughter, who had moved on to secondary, but obviously not the older one. Now I had seen this guy pass out at gatherings at one house or another, after drinking heavily anyway to the meat of it. The younger daughter suggests we play cops and robbers throughout the horse training complex she lived in. Since her dad was the caretaker, we had done this before. But eventually she was the robber, but she elected to catch me with some rope, tied my hands up in the stable we were in at the time, and then she strangely pulled down my pants. Started playing with my business, sucked on it a little, and then she was riding me, making a lot of noise. At which point her dad finds us, she screams and runs off, and he chases after her. While he's gone I manage to untie myself and stand up pulling my pants back up, only to suddenly realize her dad has returned. All of a sudden I can't breathe, because I've just been sent flying by a punch to the gut, and I'm on my ass again. He punched me in the face twice, and then started slapping the shit out of me, at which point I was so out of it, that I couldn't understand a thing he was saying to me. At some point the rest of the family arrives. The older daughter drove me to town to get checked up, and then we stayed in a motel for the rest of the week, while something happened back on the ranch. By the time my parents get back most of the swelling is gone, and I'm just left with bruises. At the time I just thought he was super drunk and beat the shit out of me because I didn't know any better. Instead I was sorta wrapped. If she had asked I probably would have said yes, but she didn't, and I had no real concept of such as a country bumpkin at the time, and then had the shit kicked out of me for the fact. As a result of all this, our 2 families basically completely cut ties, and I only saw the girl again briefly about 4 times over the next decade. I heard things about the family. Not long after the incident the parents separated, and he left to another state. The girl that had semi-wrapped me got pregnant at 16 and started popping out kids. It wasn't until I was 15 I even realized why he had beat the shit out of me. To this day I'm not sure how much the older daughter or the mother knew about what had happened before he started beating me. Later the younger daughter actually apologized to me, saying that she had seen her sister faking her boyfriend and thought it looked like fun and had wanted to try it with me first because we had known each other so long, but wasn't sure I'd say yes. TLDR was semi-wrapped playing cops and robbers. Her dad found us and beat the shit out of me as a result. Didn't realize until years later what she had been doing prior to getting the hit and why the 2 were related. Kinda faked up my ability to be sexually active following that though, and probably explains a bunch of things about modern day me. My dad was an alcoholic, but come to find out many years later he was bipolar and treated his manic moods with alcohol, so sometimes he was a manic drunk who would stay up 4 days on end and terrorize his family, and other times he wouldn't leave the couch for months. In between both of these swings he was my dad, totally smart, funny and a great dad. It was kind of like living with 3 different people, 2 you hate and 1 you love fiercely. Anyway, in one of my earliest memories my father is first throwing me in the air and catching me, and I remember being terrified. Then he's throwing the grates from the gas stove at my family sitting in the living room, and finally him holding me above his head while I'm sitting in a rocking chair that we had and totally crying my eyes out. Come to find out, this all happened in one night. My dad had been drinking for days and not sleeping and finally fell asleep. While asleep he did all of these things, and this culminated in my mother calling the police because she thought he was nuts. One minute he's asleep, next minute he's throwing the kids and household objects around. The police showed up and my dad woke to find them staring at him. He totally didn't remember anything he had done all night and was bewildered as why the police were at his house. My mother had to tell him what happened and what he did. Luckily, the broken stuff was there as evidence because he totally didn't believe her. My brother was a little older than me and my sister is a little younger, and I remember her in a crib, so I must have been about 3. My brother filled in part of this memory, but is amazed that I remember any of this because I was really young. This kind of stuff happened enough to where my childhood was kind of messed up. I just remember being afraid a lot of the time. My dad didn't come to my 9th birthday party. Compared to other stuff in my childhood, this event actually wasn't that bad, so I kind of tucked it away for most of my life. I remember my dad telling me he would definitely come and celebrate my birthday. He had even bought me this dress and said I should wear it for my birthday and he would come to see me in the dress. The night of my birthday, we had friends and family over. I put on the dress like my dad had asked and I waited on the front step waiting for his car to pull up. My parents separated when I was 3. I lived with my mom. Let's just say my mom wasn't the most supportive person and she kept coming over to say he's not coming. Come inside. Take that dress off. You look stupid. And my hopeful 9-year-old self would just reply, but he said he was coming. Eventually it got late enough and I had to come to terms with the fact that he wasn't going to make it that night. I knew my mom would just yell at me and further remind me how stupid I was for thinking he would come, so I had to hold back whatever disappointment I felt in that moment. I had largely forgotten about that day until just a few months ago. I've tried to date, but I tend to get really bad anxiety and take that as some sort of sign I need to get away from the situation. There was one guy I dated for a bit and he was always late. I would always get incredibly anxious while I would wait for him because part of me just believed that was the day he wasn't going to show up. I would usually try to look nice on the dates and do my makeup and hair, and while I would wait I would hear this voice in my head like, he's not going to come and you spent all this time on doing your makeup and hair and getting dressed up and you just look stupid. One of those days, while I was anxiously waiting for my date to show up, that memory of my 9th birthday came flooding back and I realized where that anxiety and where that voice in my head came from. I pictured my hopeful 9-year-old self sitting on that front step all dressed up, feeling her heart drop every time a car drove by that wasn't her dad's. It broke my heart thinking of that little girl and how often the adults in her life had let her down. I know compared to other stories in this thread, it's not terribly faked up, but it was surprising for me when I only recently realized how much that moment had actually affected me and how much it informed my expectations of men in general. Unfortunately, I'm part of a generation where ghosting is pretty normalized, and so my fears that one day someone will just fade away or stop responding are pretty valid. So this anxiety is something I contend with whenever I try to date, and I often hold myself back from developing feelings or getting invested until it's safe. I'm trying my best to overcome the fears I have and remind myself that all men aren't my father, but it's been kind of an uphill battle and I'm taking it day by day. I always thought it was a dream and I don't remember too much, but crying and it just seemed weird. When I was about 3 maybe 5 my dad rescued me and my brother from this tweaker trailer my mom had us staying at. My mom has always been out of control junkie and putting us in fuck up situations our whole lives anyway. She sorta kidnapped us. My dad drove down to Oregon with his friend Jay and Jay's dad so get us back. Mom wasn't at the trailer when he rescued us, and some of the dudes staying at the trailer with us wouldn't open the door for my dad, so they broke the door down. Some people were nodded out on the floor and the trailer was filthy. So dad gets me, and some other guy was in the back room with my brother and didn't want to give him back. So JS dad pistol whipped the guy and rips my brother out of his arms. Come to find out later my brother was locked in the back room a lot. I had no idea how horrible my mom was until 2 years ago. I always knew she was a bad parent, but I guess either my family really hated her or something so made her seem a lot worse. I'm 26 so it took my family a long time to tell me. I hate my mom and me and my dad don't have a good relationship, but I'm just glad he's nothing like my sheet mom. On a happier note, my family are pot farmers, and when I was a child I used to help water the plants. I never thought anything of it until I was like 14. Lol, that's when I realized growing hundreds of pot plants wasn't normal for everyone. When I was in 4th grade, probably around 9 or 10, I remember sitting on my bed in my room and eating out of a bag of chips. I was always a small kid, but I never really thought much of my size. I remember my dad walking into my room and standing in the doorway watching me eat. He then continued to tell me that I needed to start watching what I eat because I was getting fat and I looked awful. You know when you're a kid and you're kind of ignorant to certain things? Up until that exact moment I was completely unaware of my size and had never been self-conscious about how I looked. From that point on, I felt guilty after I ate anything. I remember being in middle school and crying and begging my mom not to make me go to school because I looked bad. Around the time I was in 8th grade I started starving myself. I wouldn't eat again until I felt like my stomach was completely flat. By the time high school came around, I was full on making myself throw up pretty frequently after meals, and this continued into college. I finally realized that I had a serious problem during a particularly bad week of my sophomore year of college. I was stressed out and binge eating all week and would make myself throw up after everything that I ate. I had made myself throw up so much in just a couple of days that all of the stomach acid had burned my throat so bad I couldn't even talk and was in excruciating pain. My best friend and roommate at the time took care of me all week, going to the pharmacist for me, making me homemade chicken soup, checking on me in between classes. She of course just thought that I had strep the whole time, not realizing the real reason why my throat was in such bad condition. It wasn't until this past year that I really learned how to be healthy and realized that I'm really not as big as I feel sometimes. I've gotten better, but I hardly ever walk past a mirror without glancing at my stomach and trying to decide if I look fat or not. Keep in mind, I'm 5 foot and weigh about 125. I know it's irrational, but sometimes it's a thought that just won't go away. I still wonder to this day if my father ever knew how bad his words faked me up. I'm 23 now, and I still think of them often. I didn't realize that when I was 7 to 8, my dad was in rehab and we visited him for Christmas until I was in college. The rehab facility was called Michael's house, and I really just thought he was staying with a friend named Michael in my kid brain. Michael was the best friend ever because he was rich enough to have a soda machine at his house. Not really a faked up memory, but one that I sorta spiraled over when all the pieces clicked, because my dad is a very conservative pastor now, and it was a real wham bam realization of his past drug use. / edited for follow-up memories / adding to the story. My dad still struggled to stay clean for a bit after this rehab visit, plus a few more times. In 6th grade, I was homesick one morning, but decided by lunch that I had a lot of work to do and wanted to go back. My sickness was mostly fake. My dad had been home all day in his room, which was locked. I knocked and he answered. He was sweaty and had this tone of voice that I have never heard before since, sorta hoarse and spassy. I said I needed to go to school. He got dressed, and when I got to school I told my mom, a teacher there, that he was in his room all day. I'm still not sure if he was trying to kill himself via rod or if it was just a drug spiral, but that really could have been a terrible day. As it is, he truly got clean after that day, and you would never know talking to him now. This is the story that I should have initially posted. The memory was only triggered when I saw other comments about similar moments. When I was young and even into a teenager, there would be times where my mom would get really drunk and wrestle me to the ground and pin me between her legs. It could be because I was on my laptop at 9 PM or just because she felt like it. Another time my dad took me to an AFL game and then to hang out with his friends. who he hadn't seen in years. My mom calls him up screaming that he's cheating and just in hysterics, saying to bring her daughter back. I tried to call her and calm her down. I'm probably 10 and she wouldn't answer the phone. I'm calling and no answer. So I freak out and call family members to see if they've heard from her. My dad didn't care because he was sick of her abuse and just wanted to hang out with his friends. Came home to find a half-eaten chicken, like a whole roasted chicken, in the front yard, the front door open, and my mom passed out naked with wine in her hand. When I was probably 5, my dad went to hang out with his very close friend, a father figure really, and while he was gone my mom told me he was a terrible person and hurting our family etc. So that when he got back I was sitting in her lap on the kitchen floor crying. Pretty much my whole life I have taken care of my drunk mom, taken abuse from her, and forgiven her for everything. She's done some pretty terrible shit. I thought nice moms were just things on TV, or at the very least, that everyone had one bad parent. My dad has always been the best thing in my life. Saved me from her, even when she turned me against him, even when she kidnapped me to Oklahoma and brought a crackhead along for the ride, whom she faked in the same room as me, and I was about 7. Thank God for my dad, or who knows where I would be. Maybe I would be the carny faking hoe my mom called me, because I told her she was an alcoholic. I was 14 and suicidal because of her actions, and also being heavily bullied at school, so this cut extra deep. Also I was a virgin who had only had a boyfriend for like a day once in the 8th grade. Kinda too much to put in the words. I have a lot of examples, here are a few. Some of these aren't even realizations, they're just faked up. The depression, when my cousin was displaying suicidal tendencies and began hurting herself. My aunt, who I have a really good relationship with, which is why this was so odd to me, told me I thought that you would be the one doing this, not my daughter. To me that basically meant your dad abandoned you, so you should been doing this, not my child. Okay. The molestation. This memory is hazy, but when I was younger my mom was busy with something, but I needed to take a shower. My uncle volunteered to help me shower. I thought this meant just make sure I use enough soap or something, but no, it was a shower together. I have a distinct image in my head from both of us sitting in the shower tub floor and he's grabbing my dick and I'm grabbing his. Thankfully this only happened one time. Or maybe I just don't remember / repressed the other times. There's no telling. The fight. My first fight was me fighting my uncle, the same one as above, mom's brother, at age 15 to protect my grandmother and mom. To this day I don't know what his deal was. I just had to step in cause nobody else would, and I could tell it was gonna get worse. Didn't think much of it at the time, but now it kinda haunts me cause he acts like it never happened. The post-mortem. In my culture, the oldest man of the family is supposed to bathe the body of the deceased and the family when they pass, before the funeral. First found out about this when the same uncle had to do this for his dad. I don't know about you guys, but when my mother passes, I think I'd go faking insane if I had to bathe her fac. The fighting PT too. I also have vague memories of my parents fighting etc. And one time I remember hearing lots of fighting and then all of a sudden it went quiet, so I thought they were done. I went back into the living room and my father was choking my mother with such force that her face was turning shades and her feet were lifted off the ground. He stopped because he saw me staring in shock. Who knows if that faking trash man would stopped if I wasn't a witness. Much more. But it's 3:17 AM and I'm too tired to unlock suppressed memories. Guess I'm not sleeping tonight. Edit. Thought of another. My mom would sometimes scold me, as you would, when a child isn't cooperating or doing the right thing, and it wasn't abusive or anything like that. My mom is an angel. But when I would find a pack of cigs in the car or some drugs and ask what it was, my dad would never explain and just say it's my friend's stuff, but don't tell mom, because she yells at you and I don't. It was bad enough he had me keep quiet on his behalf, but the faker had to try and turn me away from my mom like that too. Piece of shit. Haven't seen him in 13 years. He made it clear we aren't his first priority. My 5th grade teachers were probably having an affair with each other. We were in an advanced program that split the classes among the two of them, one for social studies and history, another math science. Both of them were married. Hell, the man had literally taken time off that year because his wife had a baby. But they were very oddly close with each other. One particularly candid girl loudly proclaimed during class that her mom thought they were having an affair, and the female teacher tried to explain that they were just friends. I believed her then. I don't now. At one point, during a game we were playing for her birthday, the male teacher literally gleefully slapped her on the ass in front of the entire class of 10 to 11-year-olds. This was after it was made clear to them that parents thought they were sleeping with each other. Quick reminder, his wife had literally just given birth to his daughter. They divorced their spouses around the same time several years ago. Then, just recently, they announced an engagement on Facebook without ever having been openly dating. I texted my best friend, who'd been in the class with me. She has some damage in her family life, so she seriously hates cheaters, and the male teacher was a little rude to her, so she really hates him, and we just talked about what a faked up situation it was in hindsight. When I was 9 I used to walk to school together with a girl from my class. She would come every morning to our door to pick me up. Then one day she came earlier and asked if she could eat breakfast with us. She was invited to join us, and I didn't think about it more, and neither did my mum. I think it was not that uncommon for kids to eat dinner at friends' house, so why not breakfast? But then, she started to do this more often, almost every morning. I remember my mum asking if they didn't have breakfast at home. Then, soon after this, I was visiting that friend after school, and it was weird. We couldn't have any snack because there was nothing on fridge, just beer. When we came there her mum wasn't home, only some guy. I asked if it was her stepfather, but she said she wasn't sure and thought it was some friend of her mother's. The whole home was also messy, but I just thought that it's cool she doesn't have to clean her room. Then her mother arrived and started to fight with the guy. When I later told about this to my mother, she asked me all sorts of strange questions that I don't remember anymore that well. I just remember I didn't understand why she asked. Then she went to visit my friend's mother to talk, and when she came back home she just told me that it's better if I meet my friend in our home, or we play outside, but not at her place. But we didn't play together that often anymore. She didn't walk to school with me, and at school she was distant. Once she told me that she hates me because me and my mum made it so that social workers will make her move away from her mother. I didn't understand at all what she meant and thought that she lied about my mum doing something, and we just stopped being friends. I wasn't even sad because I always thought she was strange and even little mean sometimes. She talked about things I didn't understand, how it's important to look sexy to get boyfriend, and how she wants to get older boyfriend soon, and I had many friends I rather played with tbh. When I think about this now I feel sad. Her mother was really young and probably didn't have resources to raise kid, and I hope they got help from social workers. Maybe she was able to stay with her mother, who knows, but in any case I hope she got breakfast at home. When I was about 6 or so, I began taking lessons in Taekwondo. My brother and I were super into Power Rangers and Dragon Ball Z, so we stuck with it. After about 2 years, I had gotten fairly good at sparring. However, since I was big for my age, I often pulled my punches so as not to hurt other kids. Even so, I was ranked one of the top 20 in my state. Now something to remember is that my father is a narcissist and an alcoholic, and he did not deal with my lack of title well. So, one day, he took me up to the pasture. We lived on a farm, and told me to try to hit him. I was confused, but I attempted to do so, obviously with no success. He would bet away every single one of my punches and kicks with ease, until he finally became frustrated enough to go on the offensive. His first real hit connected just behind my right ear. Until then I had always thought that seeing stars was something goofy for cartoons. It was not. The fight he had orchestrated quickly just turned into a 36-year-old man beating his 8-year-old daughter. One particularly hard blow to the chest knocked me to the ground, and I tried to crawl away, terrified and angry and humiliated. I heard him walk towards me, and in a moment of fear, I looked for something to throw. I was close to a fresh cow pie, and I scrambled to get to it. I turned and flung it, hoping to splatter it in his eyes, so I could just run and get away, but it missed, and smeared down his work shirt. I froze. I was sure he was going to kill me. If he had beaten the hell out of me for no reason that I could see, he would end me for ruining his work shirt. Instead, he laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. He was delighted that I had gotten angry enough to throw cow shit at him, because that was the point. He just wanted to make me angry. He took off the shirt, scooped me up like I was still small, and told me, as lovingly as I have ever heard him say anything, to remember this the next time I thought about letting one of those little beaches beat me. So, I became a menace when sparring. It seemed like in one summer half my division dropped out, just to avoid being in the ring with me. I became known as the Terminator and I received a state championship that year, all to avoid another trip up to the pasture with him. I was forbidden from telling my mother what happened, and because she was working insane hours, I think she only saw one of the bruises, which was quickly played off. I think I said I'd accidentally gotten hurt while playing, but was fine now. The next year she and my dad started getting a divorce, which was kind of a relief. It's been 20 years and I only realized how messed up this story was about a month ago. I mentioned the rough details to a coworker that I'm rather close to, and she said, "So, wait, your dad was physically abusive? How have you never said something before?" I just didn't know. When I was about 2.5 or 3 years old, we lived with my grandma. It was just me, my mom, dad and her who lived in that small house. One day I wanted to go outside and play, as any 3-year-old would, but my grandma stopped me and held onto my arm telling me I wasn't allowed to go outside. This is when my mom stepped in and said that I was her son and that she was giving me permission to go outside and play. I vividly remember that after that my grandma pulled my mom's hair and that caused my mom to grab my grandma's hair and boom, they were fighting. I didn't know any better and went outside and saw my dad on top of the van we used to have as he was giving it a wash. I forgot what I told him, but pretty much told him to go inside the house or something along those lines. He went in, and I waited about 15 seconds before I went in. But when I did, I remember standing in the doorway and seeing my mom on the ground and my dad and grandma both kicking her. That's the last thing I remember. Then I remember being at a phone booth with my mom, and she was on the phone either with a women's center or the police, I can't remember, but we ended up in a women's center for a week, I believe. I didn't think much of it growing up until I got to college. For whatever reason, that memory finally clicked that year. It was something faked up that I witnessed, and I blamed myself for a good while. I would think maybe if I didn't want to go out and play, maybe if I hadn't told my dad to go inside the house, all these maybes faked with my head for a long while, and these thoughts and memory would be magnified tenfold when I would drink crying status. I went to counseling for it at my college's counseling services, and that's when talking about it to someone helped. He helped me realize it wasn't my fault, and that was a huge lift. That is the first memory that I remember in my life. I've made peace with myself though now. It doesn't affect me the way that it used to. When I was about 7, I tried to purposely injure myself in order to attain friends. I was bullied throughout school, mainly for being bookish and kind of weird. I was honestly so desperate for friends that I'd pretty much try anything. I noticed that whenever any classmate broke a bone, people would be really nice to them so they could sign a cast, and so they got to stay inside for lunch, as the injured child could pick someone for company and they could play board games inside, out of the cold. So, night after night, I would try to throw myself down the stairs. I would stand on the edge of the rail at the top of the stairs and try and get myself to let go of the part of the stairs I was holding onto. The bone I was aiming to break was my leg, because this would mean more people would be nice to me, so they could have a go on my crutches, and also so I could get out of sports for longer. I was bullied for being terrible at sports. I was a short, skinny, weak kid who had little hand-eye coordination. Thankfully, I never actually did it, but looking back, I feel horrified that I, as a young child, was so desperate for friends that I was willing to endure lasting damage. In the meantime, my imaginary friends had to suffice. The most ironic thing was that when I eventually had a bad injury a few years later, it was at the hands of a popular, intimidating kid, so no one could care less. I know this is much less consequential than the other stories told, but I needed to get this off my chest as I have never told anyone about this before. My mother died when I was 2, and to take the pressure off of my dad, I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house, so there were situations in which friends would come over when I was there. Once a friend, didn't hang very often with him, came over and we were in the garden, playing. At some point he told me that he had to go to the toilet. I told him that he could just go inside, but he declined and walked away. After a few minutes he came back and told me that he had to show me something. Beneath my grandparents' house is a vegetable garden, and also some small buildings, where they and the neighbors, which are also the landlords, store tools and stuff like that. There are paved paths to walk on. So we walk down this path, and he stops at the corner of the small shack. There is an upside down pot next to the wall. He lifts it up, and beneath it is a literal pile of sheet. This fucking guy shat onto the brick path in my grandparents' garden and covered it up with a cooking pot that was used in the garden, probably to hold food for the chickens or seeds. I didn't really know how to handle the situation, and I never told anyone. Of course I was taken aback, but now this literal sheet is blowing my mind. Why? Just why? I can't wrap my mind around it. Also, I can't imagine the reaction of the person who found it. Either one of my grandparents, or one of the neighbors. Oh, yeah, this was the last time I invited him over. My mom had a friend when I was younger, and she had this little girl. They were both really good people, and I would always play with the little girl and we would play Power Rangers, stuff like that. Well, one day this girl said a cuss word like shit, or damn or something, and remember she was probably 6 or 7, because I was 5. Her mom overheard her saying all this stuff and came outside, ran around the trailer and jerked her up saying, "What did I tell you was going to happen if you said another bad word?" I looked at my mom and she was just as confused. So the woman takes her in the bathroom and proceeds to wash her mouth out with soap and says, "You stay in there until you realize that you can't use bad words in this house," and slams the door. Well, just so happened 20 minutes goes by and this girl hasn't came back out, and I ask her mom when is she coming out, and she goes to the bathroom door and yells, "Are you okay?" and no answer. So she tries to go in and the door is locked. So the mom proceeds to kick the door in yelling, "If you're in there just sitting and not opening this door, I'm going to whip your ass." Finally kicks the door down and the girl is blue from head to toe, slumped over. I don't know if the soap clogged her up throat and she couldn't breathe, or if she was allergic to it. I have no idea, but we had to call the ambulance. She's fine now, and she's a great girl who works out and goes to college, basically got her life together. But that moment scared me so bad. Anytime I hear a parent say, "I'm going to wash your mouth out with soap," I step in and tell them that story. This is pointless to post, but feels somewhat therapeutic, since I'm all caught up in these memories now. But I had this cousin who was about 3 years older than me that I had known since before I can remember. I considered him to be one of my best friends in the world, and spent countless days with him. As we got older I saw him less, and when I did get to see him, he just wasn't the same. I started to dislike him, and I didn't really have a good reason why. When I was about 12 he made some sexual comments towards me over text, and I just remember sitting there looking at my little flip phone and slowly realizing that he had sexually assaulted me several times, and everything just clicked, and it was like a punch in the gut. I just remember pacing the hallway outside my mom's bedroom crying and wondering if I should tell her, then standing outside my sister's bedroom and thinking the same thing, and then the garage where my dad was, and I just couldn't do it. I was so scared and helpless, but so ashamed and confused. I told him not to try and talk to me ever again, and things just got worse from there. Every time I saw him, until about age 16, was a nightmare. I never let him touch me again except for one time, when I was caught off guard at 16. We were in public at my job, and I thought I was safe, but I wasn't. I've tried to forgive him, because he comes from a truly awful home, but I just can't, especially because of how disgusting his behavior is these days. and his whole family defends him relentlessly, and they send him to therapy occasionally, but I truly believe he needs to be in some sort of facility away from people. I've only told about 3 people this, but I've always tried to downplay it, because of some leftover shame I guess, and a little bit, because the first person I ever told didn't take it seriously at all, and basically ignored the whole situation, but now I'm in a downward spiral remembering all this. So yeah, thanks for the venting space, Reddit. When I was 4, my house was raided by the police, based on a report, ended up being fake, by an ex-friend of my mother's. She accused my mom of being a meth cook. So I'm in the back of the house at like 5 AM in the middle of December, watching some old Disney Channel show about koala pilots, reading a Toys R Us Christmas catalog, and eating a Pop-Tart, when I hear the door get kicked in. Little me wasn't too worried, because my house had always been pretty loud and wild, as my dad did security for a rock band and they were around a lot, and my mom, while not a meth cook, was a pill junkie. So I hear the door get kicked in, and these beams of light coming down the hallway, and someone yelling, "Anyone back there?" So little buzzkill says I am, and the cops come back, and see me, and get a sort of sad look on their faces. They hold my hand, and take me out to the living room. My dad is sitting at the table, angrily yelling at 3 other cops, and one guy in a suit. Detective? I still don't really know, and my mother is on the couch in handcuffs, crying. They ask what I was watching, and I tell them, and they turn it on and sit me down on a chair across the room from my mom. One of them goes back, and gets my Pop-Tart, and catalog and tell me to stay there. I literally asked the girl across the street from me if that ever happened to her, because I was a little kid and didn't know that it was a really faked up experience. My parents to this day try to downplay it, saying that it's not a big deal and that it was a mistake. I'm 17 now, and I'm just now fully realizing the extent of shit my parents did when I was younger, and that my dad still does. It's disgusting. I've talked about this incident on a different Ask Reddit before, but once, when I was a kid, I was staying over at my cousin's with my older sister. My cousin's parents had just gotten divorced, and her dad, being fairly wealthy, moved to a house practically on the sand in Huntington Beach. The beach was literally a street away. So, my uncle, being trusting of my cousin and sister, and a cliche somewhat neglectful wealthy parent of an only child, let us go down to the beach on our own. I was about 9 or 10, I think, just starting to develop breasts. Early, I know. We had fun splashing in the waves, but since I was younger, I always ended up kind of left out. So, I decided to walk back up to the sand and sit on my towel. As I'm sitting on my towel, enjoying the sun, this older man, maybe 45, 50, walks up and starts chatting with me. At first, it's normal and he's just asking how my summer is going, and what I'm doing by myself at the beach. I was a pretty faking dumb kid, so I didn't try to get out of Dodge, or think that maybe I should be wary of this stranger. As the conversation goes on, he nods to my towel which said lifeguard on it with a big white cross, pulls down his sunglasses, looks me in the eye with a smirk, and says, "So, if I start drowning out there, are you gonna come give me mouth to mouth?" I somehow still was completely oblivious as to what he was getting at and just laughed and shook my head as if it was some kind of normal joke an adult would tell a child. Luckily, my sister and cousin came up right then and tugged me away while giving the guy death glares. It took me until high school age to even remember the event, but when I did, I was skeeved the fuck out what may have happened had the conversation been allowed to continue. When I was a kid, maybe 4 or 5, my mom would always let me drive on the dirt road to our house after she picked me up from school. This led to me having a very good grasp and confidence of driving, and for a child that couldn't reach the pedals, I was probably better at it than some adults. This is just to give you a little understanding on how the next part of the story was even possible. I don't remember the occasion, or exactly how old I was. I only know that it was warm enough to allow young me, my guess is 8, no older than 10, to wear a pink dress and a pair of white boots. I remember picking this very specific outfit to go to a party? A trip to a friend of my mom's? I don't know where we went, or what we did, but at some point it was nighttime, pretty late, and it was time to go home. I remember being in the passenger seat of the car and then, for some reason, my mom stops the car after a few miles and says you're going to have to drive home. I know this wasn't a dream. Instances just as senseless or dreamlike have happened to me throughout my life because my mom suffers from a rampant, untreated mental illness and almost none of my life up to that point was sensible or sane. That is the reason that no alarm bells went off in my child brain. I drove us home that night, a trip that was several miles in the dark. Young me was so excited to be able to help, and I got to drive on the real road. Our home at the time was in an incredibly rural area, so, at the very least, this was probably the safest scenario for this to happen. No traffic, no cops, automatic transmission, etc. My mom gave me directions which indicates to me that she wasn't drunk or high, she just, I don't know why she did it. Maybe she had a nervous breakdown. Maybe it was lithium. Maybe she didn't realize someone had drugged her drink until she tried to drive home. This was before cell phones were very common, so we had no contact with anyone else until we got back to our house. I've never brought this up with my mom, but the more I think about it, the more I believe that I will the next time we talk. My experience isn't as dramatic as most here, but it's certainly more mysterious than I appreciate it to be. In elementary school I had a big buddy that mysteriously disappeared. At my school the little buddies were between grades 1 and 2, and the big buddies were around grade 5 to 7. When we first got paired up, I remember thinking he was the weird one I didn't want to get paired with, but I just chose not to care. He had a pudgier face and curly black hair. I don't have many memories of him, but the last memory I had was him taking me under the playground after school and trying to organize a time for me, or him, to come over. By the time I noticed him, my dad had found me and was standing nearby at this point and was trying to take me home. I told him everything about what my big buddy was saying whilst standing there, and my big buddy seemed embarrassed. I remember vividly my dad looking at him with a fixed expression, neutral, slight down curl to his lips, nodding and so on as my buddy began talking to him. After that I never saw my big buddy again, even when the rest of the class went to see their big buddies. Years later I have a sour feeling in my gut about it all, and my father denies all knowledge of this big buddy, even his name, which I still remember to the extent as to where we wrote it in our old phone book. In retrospect, I realize that the reason I can only remember how I felt, uncomfortable to say the least, and not what my big buddy said that day, was probably because I couldn't understand everything he was saying to me at my age. I've never liked being touched much, and when I do I like to be asked. I hate hugs, to the point my friends will say, I know you hate being hugged, but I really want to hug you right now, can I? And I'll let them, but I don't enjoy it. I believe the term is called tactile defensive, but I never knew why until my older sister pointed out that she knew exactly why I hated to be hugged, and once she brought it up I remembered it vividly and knew she was right. As a child, my dad's sister and her husband, Aunt D and Uncle B, demanded hugs and kisses, which I didn't want to give. And when I refused they would literally put me in a bear hug, holding my arms down, while I panicked and screamed and cried to be let go, and I would not be released until I said the magic words, which were, I love you very much Aunt D/Uncle B, depending on who was holding me. No matter how much I cried, begged, pleaded, struggled, they would literally not let me go until I said those exact words, and sometimes they didn't believe me, and I'd have to convince them that I really did love them, still while being restrained physically. My mother said this never happened in front of her, because she would have put a stop to it, but my sister and I remember it happening a lot, so clearly my father let it happen. If your kid doesn't want to hug kiss a relative, respect their decision. My situation is extreme, but hurting old Aunt Milda's feelings is preferable to teaching a child that anyone is owed access to their bodies if they don't want to give it, or an adult like me who hates being hugged and literally has to grit their teeth through every embrace. After my mom separated from my dad, she started dating our real estate agent who lived down the street from us once we moved. He was nice and great with kids. He played with the neighborhood kids all the time, and they loved him. He was especially close to the boy and girl who lived next door to me. One day my siblings and I go over to swim at his place, and once it's time to leave, he tells me to stay behind to show me something. So I do, while my siblings run along home. He brings me downstairs, sits me on the washer and starts to play a game. He licks my ear and blows in it, and then tells me to do it to him, which I do. Eventually I get weirded out. I was like 6 and want to leave because his basement creeped me out and I didn't like the game. So I get up and leave. I honestly thought it was a dream until I was a teenager and I told my mom about it. She told me it wasn't a dream after I was able to tell her specific things about his basement that I wouldn't have known unless I'd gone down there. Now I wonder if he ever did anything to other kids. We ran into him a couple years ago at a water park. He was with the girl who was my next door neighbor at the time, the one he was close to. They looked very close, but she was an adult by then. But I still got a creepy vibe from their interaction and wonder if he ever molested her. It seems very likely. To this day, I still can't stand anyone licking my ear or blowing in it. When I was a little girl around 3 or 4, I remember staying at my dad's house for the weekend. My parents were divorced and playing in the backyard with my brother and half siblings. They were all jumping on the trampoline while I was playing in one of those toy red and yellow toy cars. Well, I wanted to be on the trampoline with the big kids too, so I climbed up to join them. I don't remember what happened, but the next thing I knew, I was in excruciating pain and I couldn't stand. I had to crawl down from the trampoline to inside on all fours because nobody would help me and I couldn't walk. When I got inside, my dad yelled at me for getting on the trampoline, wrapped up my ankles, and tried to play it off as a sprain. I couldn't walk or stand for the rest of the day, and he kept berating me, saying things like, "You're fine, stop being such a cribby and get up." When my mom came to pick me up, I thought she would yell at me too. To my surprise, it was my dad who got the earful, and she was pissed. She took me to a real hospital like a responsible adult, and we found out the ankle was completely broken. I had to wear a hard cast for months. I felt so guilty at the time, but looking back, it was 100% my dad's fault. Apparently what happened was he threw all us kids outside, then went inside to get drunk and or high, and left us alone for hours. He had a history of being neglectful. When I was even younger, I became severely dehydrated in his care and had to get a catheter put in at the hospital. Later found out he was also molesting my older sister. I haven't seen the post since I was 10ish, thank God. When I was 8, I was cycling around the neighborhood with my friend, and we used to help look after younger kids to help the parents out a bit. We were helping look after a 3-year-old when this man came up and was hanging out with the boy's mum. He talked to me and my friend a bit and eventually asked if we wanted to go for a walk up the lane with him. This lane was relatively nearby. It was always relatively quiet with not many houses near there. My friend and I said no, saying we probably wouldn't be allowed, and cycled away. I remember feeling a little uneasy because I couldn't go home as my parents had gone out and I didn't have a key, so I kept cycling around until they got home. I didn't tell my parents until the next morning when I saw the man walk past our house and I started freaking out, though I didn't fully understand why. My parents called the police after I told them what had happened and didn't tell me much about the situation, so it was a long time before I really understood. A few years later, I was told that the man was known to the police as a pedophile who had previously raped his own daughter, and I recently got told that the police spoke to him that morning and apparently searched him and found that he had rope and tape in his bag. I'm glad that my friend and I both instinctively felt weirded out around him and didn't go for that walk with him. When I was younger, I used to be terrified of storms. When I saw terrified, I mean like hide in my room and sometimes cry. Backstory on that: there was a tornado in Ohio where I lived at the time, and I woke up to tornado sirens, strong winds, and heavy rain. I was about 4 to 5 years old at the time, and I went to go to my mum's room to wake her up because I was terrified. While in the hallway, a flash of lighting illuminated a dark figure in the hallway. I was absolutely terrified. So I think from then on I associated storms with scary dark figure plus sirens and all that jazz. Sorry for the long background info. So anyways, a few years later at the time we were in Georgia near Fort Benning. Stepfather was a military hardus. And there was a hurricane south of us which was causing a lot of tornado clusters around the area. So lots of sirens plus lightning and all that other jazz. I guess I was being scared or something, and my stepdad said that's it, I can't take this shit anymore, and proceeded to throw me outside with a tornado close by, and said you're not coming back in until you aren't scared. I was out there for 20 minutes. I was soaked and shivering, but I wasn't crying anymore or freaking out. The ironic part is that I love storms now. So it ended up working out okay. It's just the way that the situation went down that is faked up. PS. I have plenty of more stories to share from hardest stepdad if anyone else wants to hear it. When I was probably 9 or 10, I was at a friend's house. We were sitting on her trampoline in the backyard, and her dad was standing at the grill on the other side of the yard just out of earshot for regular conversations. She started talking about the person who had moved in across the street from her, and how creepy he was. In that I need to have a story to impress you kind of kid voice, she tells me that he rapped a 7-year-old. I never looked into this house specifically, but our neighborhood had a relatively high number of such offenders in and around it, so she could very well have been right. Anyway, I didn't know what that meant at the time, and I called her bluff by simply asking what does rap mean. She sat there for a second before admitting she didn't know. Then, she yells for her dad, who looks over at us to hear his daughter yell across the yard, "What does rap mean?" Her dad just kind of stared for a moment before muttering "You don't need to know about that," and returning to his grilling. Of course at the time I didn't get why he was so weird about it. Now I not only realize how upsetting it probably was for him to hear his young daughter ask about it, but I also laugh when I think about how ridiculous and out of THW blue that question was. When I was in first grade, somebody dared me to sit in another person's seat on the bus. We had assigned seats. The person who normally sat there tried to push me out, and I was pushing back. Sooner or later, the kid who dared me shoved me a bit into the seat. I didn't realize he shoved me until years later, and I started to fall backwards. I was pushing backwards against the person in the seat, whom was using her feet to push me. When I fell backwards, the back of my head hit the corner of the heater on the bus. I must have passed out, since when I woke up, I felt something wet on my hand. At first, I thought it was just water somebody spilled, but when I looked at my hand, it was blood covered. I was able to stand up, and that's when the bus driver finally noticed me. She stopped on the side of the road, cleaned up all the blood on my head, and quickly drove me home. My parents, who were poor, decided not to take me to the hospital, but instead shaved my head and cleaned out the wound themselves. So, it took me a little while to realize that it was kind of messed up that they didn't take me to the hospital, but I didn't realize until way later that what was more messed up was that not a single kid told the bus driver that I was on the floor bleeding out. It finally took me standing up and crying for the bus driver to notice. TLDR, I nearly bled to death because people on my school bus wouldn't tell the driver that I was bleeding out. When I was but a tiny ignorant child, I practically raised myself. My dad was always working, and my mom was always taking care of my sister who is paralyzed from the waist down and hooked onto machines to stay alive. To give the short version of that story, I would always stay in my room and play with my Hot Wheels on my cool little rug thing that had the roads and buildings on it. I remember every now and then when I'd leave my room to see what the family was doing, the house would smell really bad, and I'd see these plastic tube things on the counters. Whenever I'd try to talk to my parents about getting some food or literally just talking to them about anything, they wouldn't respond. My mother would stand in the middle of the hallway pacing back and forth, phone in hand, just pressing random buttons and kinda panting like a dog almost. My dad was always in the bedroom, and I was always denied access in there, but whenever I would see him, I'd see what I believed was him playing with fire and plastic while messing with these weird looking rocks. As a kid I always thought rocks were cool, which is also why I have nerve damage in my hands, by thinking the cool white and red glowy rock under the BBQ pit was a good thing to pick up. Anyways, long story slightly, not as long, my parents were frequent users of crack and would cause them to neglect their children, and is also the cause of my sister's disability. My mother doesn't know. I remember everything, and I know why my sister is how she is. She ruined an innocent girl's life from her pathetic addiction and now reaps the benefits of free money from the government. It's disgusting and she will never be forgiven for her incompetence. Mine is not even in the same league of faked up as all of the other comments, but I'll give it a try anyway. In the county that I live in, along with rings, it's customary for married women to wear a specific type of necklace, ultimate symbol of married life, and is generally gifted to them by their husbands, representing their bond, or love or some shit like that. When I was around 9, we had a substitute filling in for one of our regulars for a day. The sub decided we were ahead of schedule in regards of the syllabus anyway, so she said she'd give us the lecture off, just sit inside the classroom, and do whatever we wanted, as long as we didn't disturb others. Anyway, we all got to doing our own stuff, and the sub went around the class checking on us once in a while. After she was convinced everything was in order, she just kept pacing back and forth in front of us. She was pretty young, say around 20 to 23 or so, but she was married. I could see her wearing the necklace. After a while, she starts fiddling and playing with the necklace while smiling to herself and biting her lips. None of us give it too much thought, but as time passed she started pacing around faster. The fiddling gets more and more intense, and her face is now visibly red. She keeps pacing around at an almost feverish speed, and at this point she's practically yanking in the necklace. Her face is now the color of a cherry and she's shaking below the hips, as if she needs to go pee really bad. She then proceeds to lift the pendant up to her lips and kiss it for 3 full seconds. After this she stops pacing and sits down in a chair, looking as if she just ran up 4 flights of stairs. For the remainder of the lecture, which was barely around 2 to 3 minutes, she sits with her head thrown back and her eyes closed, with a hint of a smile on her face. As 9-year-old, my entire class was completely confused about what the fuck just happened. None of us asked her anything. I know it doesn't sound very bad, but I'll never forget the expression of pure satisfaction on her face. TLDR, when I was in middle school, one of my teachers orgasmed in the middle of class in front of all the students. After my parents divorced my dad, and I started hanging out more, I was 15, angsty, and wanted to act older than I really was, especially because my mom had sheltered us so much. I knew a lot about her history, and understood why my parents were divorcing from my dad's perspective, so I sided with him in most of the disagreements. She has PTSD. She grew up in a cult, raped and abused by her dad and brother from 4 years, 18 when she left and met my dad a couple years later. She was also really open about the events, describing specific ones in detail, which is also something faked up I didn't realize until recently. I'm 25 now. When I moved in with my dad, it seemed more like a rumored situation than parent-child. He commuting MF for work, but when he came home on the weekend we'd go out for dinner and a movie. I was his wingman, and pretty enthusiastic about it. It was how we bonded. I helped him pick out lingerie, he'd tell me he got laid, and we'd high five. We'd scope the perimeter for hot chicks. A few times he asked me to set him up with my 18 to 20-year-old friends, but I took it as a joke, still being in high school and him being my dad. But the weirdest aspect of our relationship was that when we would go out he would always anticipate someone thinking I was his girlfriend/wife. According to my mom, he used to say, if they ever divorced I would just become his little wife, while I was in middle school. He didn't do a lot of PDA or anything. It's weird just to hug for both of us, but we'd go to an upscale restaurant/bar and we would mingle with other adults. I'd be dressed like Pretty Woman, because teenagers have bad taste in fashion, and I'd been conditioned to think her wear was casual, booty shoes, platform heels, hair extensions, low-cut shirts and tons of makeup. Now that I'm engaged and preparing to start my own family, I'm disgusted with his behavior. I've learned about some of his history that led him to be very open about his sexuality, but it doesn't really take away the weirdness or responsibility for common sense when it came to raising a daughter. My sister and I used to play a game called Angeland, where we'd be different characters whom we'd create and develop as time went on. It literally went on 4 years. When I was about 8 and she was 12, she created a character named John, who she said was my boyfriend. We shared a room and had bunk beds, and she'd often join me on mine, just playing with our stuffed animals and whatnot. But with John she'd encourage me, as him, to get under the covers, where she'd then proceed to kiss me all over my face. I enjoyed that. It felt nice, and it was affection from my sister, which I rarely got. You know what it's like. I was the younger sibling she hated a lot of the time, whereas I worshipped her. After a while, she started saying that she, John, wanted to kiss me. I didn't really think it was a problem, and he was so reassuring that I'd like it that I agreed. She'd kiss me, then she'd say we should touch tongues, because that's what people who love each other do. I didn't really want to do that, but she was persuasive, and I wanted her to enjoy playing with me, so I did it. Didn't like it. It felt weird and disgusting to me. She laughed and said I would grow to like it. She also made me touch her in an obvious place, as well as fondle her breasts. I didn't really like that either. She asked me if I wanted her to touch me, and I said no. I can't remember if she did or not. This went on for a while. I was extremely gullible as a child, very much wanted her to love/like me, and, though it made me uncomfortable, I didn't realize there was anything really wrong with it. I realize that this is probably quite common, and that many siblings have probably had similar experiences in discovering themselves, using their siblings to understand intimacy. I also know that my sister experienced some level of abuse, though not sure how much, via another family member, which she admitted to me through an email. I never held it against her, even once I realized as a teenager what she'd done and encouraged. She's my best friend, and we are incredibly close. I do, however, think that it's affected me in some way in my trust vis-a-vis sex and intimacy, that, as well as being sexually assaulted when I was 12. Anyway, it hit me quite hard when I realized what had happened. Still, no hard feelings. My grandparents in Puerto Rico had an elderly friend from their church who lived in a shack on their property for free. They even gave him food, but I never saw the guy ever, and sometimes my grandmother was on the phone for what felt like hours waiting to talk to people about him. Well, their neighbor had a fence and coconut trees that went right up against the shack, and I was over often to play with their daughter who was about my age. One day we decided to climb the fence. We were always told not to go near that area and look into the shack to see this guy my grandparents housed. We did manage to look into the shack and saw the guy sleeping on a bed, naked, and really huge lumpy balls, like the size of grapefruits. We just stared at him for a minute and agreed that he was boring and climbed back down. Soon as we climbed back down, a coconut missed my friend's head by an inch and landed at her feet. We were so excited and took it inside to open. Later on I heard that he didn't live in the shack anymore, and when I asked I was just told that he was in peace now. When I was much older, I thought back to that and realized that the guy was homeless, really sick. Considering whatever was happening to his balls, and that my grandmother had been trying to get him help, or whatever, from hospitals or social services, whoever she was waiting on the phone forever for. PR's economy was well on the decline by then, and a lot of welfare programs and other public services were barely scraping by, if even functional. My grandparents apparently took care of him until his death. I also realized just how close I came to witnessing my friend die. We hadn't given any thought to the falling coconut, just oh look, a coconut. I actually had a best friend when I was a little kid and we did everything together. So this takes place when I was around 4 or 5 years old, and she was 2 years older and we were playing with toys. And all of a sudden she doesn't want to play anymore. I begged her to keep on going with me, and she went okay, but on one condition. She basically wanted me to show her my little kid Johnny that I had between me. I don't remember if I ended up showing her or not. All I remember is trying to dodge the request out of embarrassment and coming up with excuses to not do it. I guess my brain is trying to block that out. What I do remember though is that sometime during that I got my first kiss. And to be honest, I actually did have a crush on her as a kid. I thought for a while That was how best friends basically treated each other. That we showed each other all of our secrets. But then when I discovered Born, I realized the truth. She actually moved away a few years later, before I got to 5th grade. I don't know what happened to her. I think I might have met her again during my freshman year as I met someone that looked like her and had her same name. She even acted as if she knew me, but I really don't know if it was her because I really don't remember her last name. But that was some time ago. I've had trichotillomania since I was 6, which is a nervous habit of pulling your hair out. I remember the first day I ever started pulling. I was at my great aunt's house and it was my eyelashes. I pulled nearly all of them out, and the next morning, when my mom came to my bed to wake me up, she freaked the fuck out, like crying and asking me what I had done. I didn't understand at the time that it was an anxiety problem, so I just told her I didn't know why I did it. She yelled at me about it and told like everyone in our family about it. This made it into this humiliating ordeal for me, in turn making my anxiety worse and making me want to pull more. I distinctly remember one day after kindergarten, she made me come up to her and looked closely at my eyelashes to see if I had pulled some out that day. I had, and she got pissed and threatened to make me go tell my teacher what I had done. She also brought it up in front of my doctor and got him to tell me how I could damage my hair follicles resulting in permanent hair loss. I felt like a freak and was humiliated by this habit because of the way my mom would expose or threaten to expose my habit to other people. Looking back, I realize that she was probably trying to help me stop, but holy shit, that was the wrong way to handle it. I still pull my hair out now at 25 years old and was comforted to learn in my teens that many people suffer from this awful habit. I actually confronted my mother about the way she would yell and purposely embarrass me for it last year. She said that she told my grandmother the first time I pulled out my eyelashes and my grandma told her, "Don't you yell at that baby." But she did anyway. I told her that the way she handled it was wrong and she should have listened to her mom because she made my anxiety worse by the way she reacted. Now that I have a child of my own, I cannot imagine ever treating her that way. If she was showing signs of severe anxiety at such a young age, I would talk to her, ask her what was wrong, take her to therapy, just show general concern, not try to punish and humiliate her into stopping. It seems really cruel to me when I think back on how much shame I felt as a young child because of my mom's actions. My mom loves me and is otherwise great, but I cannot for the life of me figure out why the fact she treated me that way. I truly hope it was ignorance, but it felt like cruelty. I love my mom so much, but this is something I have yet to forgive her for, and she didn't ever apologize after I confronted her. One of my earliest memories as a kid. I was probably 3 or 4. My mom would take me to her friend's house during the day. Her friend lived by the beach, so we would either go to the beach before and or afterwards. My older brother and sister would be at school and my dad was at work. Well, she would park me in front of the TV and I would zone out and watch some random cartoon or whatever. Her friend had a red parrot that wasn't in a cage. I always remembered my mother would tell me, whenever we would go over, "Don't touch the bird, it will bite your finger off." I always remembered that bird because I always wondered what was the deal with it. I didn't remember much from going to the house besides that bird. Didn't remember what we really did there too. Years later I was talking to my brother and sister about kid stuff. I asked them what was up with mom's friend and that bird. They both got silent and looked really pissed. My sister, who is 10 years older and much more aware of the things happening when we were younger, told me that was our mother's boyfriend she cheated with on dad. It all came rushing back. I was always alone in the living room as a kid. I remember going a lot because this dude lived by the beach, also he a cool bird. I remembered my mom telling me don't tell my siblings what we did and that we went to the beach because they would be jealous. Totally faked me up when I realized it in my teens. Parents divorced shortly after. Mom was a big old cheater. She ended up having another side dude she actually married like 6 months after my parents got separated. I was always, for some reason, and still am, a bit suspicious of any and every male figure in my life growing up. Whether they were family or some random stranger. I never let anyone touch me, and if I thought they were getting too close I'd quickly move away. I always thought everyone wanted to violate me, and I never wanted that to be able to happen. I can't help but wonder if maybe something happened when I was younger that I sort of suppressed the memory but still have the instincts to be alert of anyone male. Also, a very sad story about my younger cousin. She was around 5 at the time, and I was maybe 9 or so. I remember her having this friend her age named Riley. Now, I don't know why, but my cousin's parents would let their 5-year-old daughter sleep over at some random kid's house. So one day, my cousin tells me something about Riley's older brother who was around 13. She says that he put her privates against his. Cousin also says that he made her take her clothes off and do this while his sister was downstairs doing something with the mom. Apparently this sicko saw that as a chance to rap a 5-year-old. I don't remember the boy's name, but he'd be over 18 now. My aunt and uncle brought them to court, but unfortunately never got anything filed against that family. I still wonder to this day how my cousin is doing, and if she even remembers. They didn't bring it back up again after it happened for her sake, but boy do I bet her parents are regretting letting her stay over there. I went to a vile little Catholic elementary school, even though our town had excellent public schools, and I was always a very good kid, never really in any trouble. But shortly after the beginning of my 7th grade year, some of my math assignments that I'd completed during free time in class went missing from my desk. When I went to the nun teaching the class to explain why I'd not turned in the assignment, she turned to me with her eyes bugging out of her head, her nostrils flaring, the veins on her forehead bulging, and she yelled, "Oh no, young man, and if it happens again we're going straight to the principal's office and calling your mother." Most of the nuns at my school were brought in from rural Kentucky, where they bred them, and they all had these illiterate hillbilly accents. I was flabbergasted as I'd never been spoken to that way by any lay teacher or nun previously, and that was only the beginning. For the next 2 years, this Satan-worshipping beach in a habit would take every opportunity to belittle me, would rail at me for some minor infraction, and then ostentatiously excuse the very same thing in another student, falsely accuse me of things. It was an open secret that she harbored some weird personal animus, a really disgraceful inner teacher towards a student animus towards me. I know it was known because I remember the ugly smug faces of some of the other students smirking at me when she was doing these things. And I couldn't say anything about it at the time because any other teacher or adult would say something like, "Well, why do you think she goes after you? As in, what is it that you do or have done that Sister Beach hates you so? Not what do you think is wrong with her, but what is wrong with you. She's a nun after all. She's given her life to love and serve God, so the fault must be yours." Seriously, that was the culture in those places in those days. My only option was to keep my head down and try not to bring attention to it. No one around me seemed to think anything wrong was happening. And if you've ever wondered how so many Cath priests got away with raping children in that era, know that the same groveling and fawning and fake mystique of holiness extended to the nuns was given to them, double. Nuns could get away with some horrible physical abuse too. Upon hearing about it, parents and lay teachers would just look at the ground and say, "Well, she must have had a good reason." That was all. Not, "She's deranged or dangerous." No, she had a good reason. In the 8 years I attended that school, I remember at least 3 nuns being carted off to the loony bin. 2 of them were my teachers at the time. We would be told Sister Bananas has gone away for a much needed rest. And with a class like this, it's no wonder. Seriously, they'd say that to us. And of course, as I got older and started to realize just how faked up it all was, some things became really clear to me. She had access to the school building when no one else was around and lived in a convent right next to it. She had clearly been laying in wait for any lame excuse to pounce on me like that. I had done the assignments and folded them up and left them in the corresponding page in my textbook. I know I had. That cunt had gone and stolen them out of my desk. I know it, you know it. And if I'd been clear-headed enough then, that is not Catholic, and put together all of the facts and pointed them out to anyone, do you think they'd have embraced the obvious conclusion? Not anyone in that school. Ultimately, my realization was not simply that my situation was faked up. but everything Catholic is faked up, and if anyone ever tries to tell you that the big child rap crisis could have happened in any church and that sort of thing goes on in all churches of all denominations, you call BS. It might have happened in other churches, but not to the same extent. Only Catholics, pre-crisis, ever engaged in that kind of clergy/nun blindness. Gave a 7th class report entitled Isaac Newton, alias Fig, which got a laugh from the class and a sentence of 3 swats with a wooden paddle, scheduled in a stairwell after school. My English teacher, a football coach, borrowed a 3-foot varnished pine paddle from the science teacher in the next room. They took me out of detention at the scheduled time, 2 teachers, both grinning, with 1 paddle. In my part of the Midwest, swats with a wooden board were allowed, if done with a witness present, and administered to the ass between the victim's buttocks and above the knees. While the total number of swats collected during the course of the academic year was somewhat of a badge of honor for college preppies wanting to be bad boys, they hurt like hell and left bruises that would last 2 weeks. The teachers who gave swats had their own reputations, and their individual paddles were known for, say, size, or having a special pattern of drilled holes for better speed. But the part that seemed unfair in my case was that the science teacher's paddle split in half on my English teacher's 5th excruciating swat. So the science teacher left the stairwell and returned with another paddle borrowed from the civics teacher down the hall. He then proceeded to give me 5 more swats for breaking his paddle. Thinking back, the whole scene strikes me as thuggish and Machiavellian. Devious little sheet that I was, I did seek revenge in my own way, although it was unsatisfying, because the results were never clear. All 3 of those teachers were coaches, and thus had their own locker room, and showers next to ours in the gym. One evening after school I put 3 chicken bouillon cubes inside each of their shower heads. I remember this act giving me great comfort and partial closure, but I frankly don't think anyone ever noticed. I was young, 8 or 9 maybe, and hanging out with my favorite uncle. He was a karate instructor at a cool place that had a dojo, jungle gym, arcade, and snack bar. On our way home he needed to stop by his old job to pick something up, but I was exhausted, so I begged to stay in the car. He finally caved and left me to snooze in his car with the keys in while he ran in real quick. Now, his old job was in the Bronx and this was a calm afternoon, so the streets weren't busy, and he found an easy parking spot in front of his old job. I remember waking up with a strange man in the driver's seat. He turned to me and said, "Your dad said to go into the karate dojo, go on." So sleepy me got out of the car, crossed the 6-lane street, no crosswalk, and walked into the old dojo. My uncle spots me not 10 seconds after and panics, saying, "Why are you in here?" Me, the man said, "Papa wanted me to come inside." Uncle, what man? By this time I started to come to, and just as fast he left, my uncle came back in, and in a panic, said his car was stolen. Someone called the cops. My uncle hugged me, and eventually a cop took us home to my grandparents. I don't remember a lot of what was going on that day. My dad was at my grandparents' downstairs in the dining room. I guess everyone had heard what had happened and was relieved I was okay. Not my father, though. He stood and yelled at me. Why did I get out of the car? How could I let this happen? What was I thinking? He wasn't yelling at my uncle, who'd left a young child in a car alone in the Bronx. He was yelling at me for somehow not stopping a man from stealing the car. I don't know if anyone chastised him for his reaction, because I ran upstairs to my uncle's room. He was playing a game with 2 friends to calm down after the theft. I ran to him, crying, and threw myself at him. To hell with the game. Me, you're not mad I got out of the car, right? Uncle, of course not. I can't replace you. My wallet, the car, my stuff. I can buy all that back, but I can't get another you. He handed me a controller and we played Phantasy Star Online with his friends. I know my uncle got chewed out by both sets of grandparents and my mother, and it took 2 years before anyone trusted him to take me out for fun activities again. I didn't realize at the time how faked up it was that my father yelled at me for getting out of the car. To this day I've not confronted him about how faked up that was. At times I still beat myself up that I shoulder grabbed my uncle's backpack when I got out. Edit. Grammar check. Oh plenty, except I usually was quite aware of what was happening as a kid as I was always very mature, and for someone with autism, have always had a good ability to sense disturbing energy. I had wet the bed, and I walked in on my mum and her partner doing dog/Jai style. Incidentally, that guy had an incredibly positive influence on my life. He reassured me he had the same problem as a kid and took years to outgrow it. He made me feel better in that I was still younger than the age he stopped doing it at, and shortly thereafter I stopped. In my first year of school I walked into the quiet room to try and get our teacher to help us with our work. She had been absent from the classroom for a while and all us little 4/5 year olds didn't really know what we were supposed to be doing. Two of my classmates were in there with her, both bawling like really crying hysterically, mouths wide open and all, and she looked like she was about to hit one of them. In hindsight I think I must have heard the commotion before going in. Don't really know why I went in, but I did, and I saw that at my friend's sleepover party me and one girl were still awake in the living room. My friend's mum came home drunk with a guy. They were in the kitchen making a fair bit of noise. There was a litter box shaped hole in the living room door which we could see into the kitchen through. It got to a point where she started trying to push him away when he was trying it on with her, and it got to her going no, no, no. And we could hear them faking and could see through the hole in the door that they were on the kitchen floor. It sounded like rap. That's all that I can remember at the moment, although I'm sure there's more. My mom has a very codependent relationship with my dad. It was much worse growing up than now. She has mastered the art of enabling to a T. She was a good mom overall, but the chaos we lived in cast a dark shadow. My father has always been a severe alcoholic, drug user, emotionally abusive, a cheater, and downright scary at times. Each night we knew if he wasn't home by 8, there was going to be an incident. One of dad's temper tantrums. When he came home, mom argued and yelled, they fought, furniture destroyed, cops sometimes called, suicide threats. Being a little kid, seeing your dad stand in the yard and hold a gun to his head is hard to process. She moved us in and out with relatives and even to apartments. Things would be peaceful and we would get adjusted just to move back home, and it happened again and again. As an adult I see my mother was simply doing this in an attempt to have some kind of control. What she could control is where we ended up and would hold us over his head, threaten to leave again, and so forth. We moved out till he would break down and promise change. It never changed. I remember teachers and counselors calling me out to try to discuss home life things in private, all the way from K to junior high. Mom was always too mentally caught up in being a martyr to really pay us attention. We never had money or food in the house because dad used it up. My grandma mostly footed the bill for our needs. Expressing negative feelings led to guilt trips about how everything is against her. I spent most of my time talking to imaginary friends and walking in the woods. Her patience was always limited, and I don't remember any in-depth conversations about anything. Her description of sex was sperm fertilizes the egg, that's it. I just shut down and withdrew. My brother fell into a life of hard drug use. My parents' relationship is still dysfunctional in a different way. I have always seen my mother as a victim and my brother and dad as the problem. I would continuously spin my wheels trying to help her, stick up for her, etc. As an adult, I see how ridiculous this is and clearly see the part she played. I'm there for her and provide a ear or advice, a place to get away, but have learned to let it be. She had other options, lots of them. Hell, my grandfather tried to pay her a large sum of money to leave my dad. She chose to be entangled with my father, leading us to believe she couldn't make it on her own. He did nothing for us and didn't even act like he liked us. Now he's just a sickly old man, racked with guilt, who drinks, pops pills, and makes anyone around him miserable. She just sits right under him, working herself to death, losing her health, and has no life. I didn't know that relations with alcohol weren't supposed to be so casual and abusive. I always thought that anytime someone drank to have a good time, that meant that it was always going to end in violence. I had no friends in college because everyone thought I was too stuck up because I refused to go to any parties where drinking was involved. When I was little, my dad would get very drunk and blow smoke into my face, break windows, and threaten to hit my mom. One window even broke on me while I was hiding in my parents' room because somehow my dad found his way home when my mom left him to sleep it off at someone's house. He was trying to break back in. Everyone on my dad's side of the family drove drunk. Only men were to drive, and it didn't matter if they were smashed or there were kids in the car. My stepfather was equally shitty and even more violent. I would have to blow into the breathalyzer in his truck to keep it on because he was drinking at 7 AM while driving me to school. Loud shouting matches and broken things were common at home during that time. He once threatened to hit me, but by then I was 12 and I had a bat. I promised him I would go for his replaced knee if he came at me. The kicker was that everyone knew. My dad's side of the family, my mom's side, and my stepfather's side. No one said anything in defense of us kids. No one thought to stop the bullshit. But I was the bad, troubled kid for never wanting to go to social family functions. If I didn't go, then my access to the internet was cut as punishment. I'm in my 30s now and refuse to be around drunk people or to ever drink. I guess it's not one single memory, but rather putting several together to work out the truth. My father was an alcoholic. He spent all our money on alcohol, but thankfully was never abusive. He was kinda just a dumb, kind drunk. Like mum told me one time he forgot his keys and didn't want to disturb anyone, so he slept outside on the patio. That sort's a shit. Anyway, my dad's alcoholism got so bad that when my mum said it's me and the kids, or the alcohol, he chose the alcohol. So he moved away for a bit. When my dad was away, my mum had a friend. He was weird. I didn't like him. As a young kid I already had anxiety and didn't like most adults my parents were friends with, especially men. Anyway, he and my mum spent a lot of time together. And he didn't have a job, but my sister and I started getting way cooler stuff and we could buy clothes and toys brand new from the store. Turn out my mum was having a fling with this guy she saved from a heroin overdose, and now they were using our house to sell drugs to the neighborhood, including all the parents on my school's board. My street has always been in a bad area. There was a race fight with an axe, a madam's business, more drugs, bashings, more drugs. I thought it was normal until I grew up to realize that some people don't have security screens on their windows and don't double lock every door on their house. For me, the worst I got was neglect for most of my upbringing, but I was terrible to my brothers. I didn't think I was either. I've only recently started realizing how wrong some of the things I did were. It started normally enough. One of my brothers, I'm the oldest, with each brother being born in 2.5-year intervals after me, wouldn't do what I wanted. Hit him on the head, arm, stomach, etc. I'm sure most siblings will occasionally bonk each other here or there. Eventually, though, as all kids do, they developed more willpower, so my methods to convince them had to become more forceful. Holding their arms behind their backs painfully, choking them, just any kind of forceful physical punishment that didn't intentionally injure but caused pain. At least I wasn't cruel enough to hit their junk. I realize now that I was a menace, a source of fear and pain, an abuser, and my parents were so overwhelmed with each other as well as 4 kids that they didn't have control over me. It all stemmed from my mom's belief that your elders get to make the decisions and anyone younger than them has to obey. She never verbally said this, but she was raised in that kind of environment, and it was clear enough to me through her behavior that I adopted it. I'm scared of the damage I've caused my brothers. We all have problems, but I'm afraid for the eldest, 2.5 years younger than me, as he says he remembers a repressed memory sometimes, and it causes him intense head pain. He also had several breakdowns during school and is socially inept. I feel like I'm responsible for his problems because of how I abused him, but I'm going off topic now. Basically, I didn't realize I abused my brothers until recently, and it's pretty faked up. I thought they were in the wrong for not obeying me because I was their older brother, but I was just a tyrant. When I was about 10 or 11, I wanted a woman attempt suicide. My father had abandoned my mother after she had gotten sick with a degenerative disease. Unsurprisingly, he was abusive and alcoholic. See his opportunity, he took off. Years later, he came back while mom was at a low point with the disease and stolen my 2 younger siblings. He took us across state lines and had his family threaten my deathly ill mom to keep her from coming after us, legally or otherwise. Not that she could have, sick as she was. My father, as expected, was generally terrible at parenting and left the majority of it to me. I was responsible for feeding my siblings, getting them to school, and watching them. My only regret is that I wasn't more mature at that age. I was so focused on trying to be a kid and wanting to do my own thing that my siblings were even more neglected. I know, in retrospect, that it wasn't my responsibility, but I don't think that guilt will ever go away. It was either a Zeroni or McDonald's for dinner, and sometimes dad spent more money on booze than food. I wouldn't eat, so my siblings could get enough. We all suffered in school. We slept in the same room to comfort one another. I didn't know if mom was alive or dead. My father started dating a mentally ill woman who was mystifyingly taken with him. At some point, their relationship soured, and this woman stormed into our house one evening, screaming. She proceeded to lock herself in our bathroom and attempt suicide by cutting her legs and wrists. My father rode to the hospital with her. I stayed behind and distracted my siblings with a movie so I could clean the blood before they saw it. It was so much blood. It wasn't until years later, when we were reunited with our mom, that I told her about it. She blanched. At the time, I didn't realize just how faked everything had been for us. The older I get, the more horrifying it is. When I was 11, I didn't think anything of it. I still dream about her blood, about trying to get the stain out of the carpet before my kid siblings see. When I was about 5, some men would play frisbee outside with me. It was a fun time. One day, they invited me into their apartment to pet some kittens. I had never held a kitten before, so I was absolutely elated. They took pictures of me holding the kittens and even printed one out and gave it to my mom, who naturally freaked out. That's the same age that the white streak I have in my hair showed up randomly. Don't tell me it's a faking birthmark. I'm pretty sure my mom would notice that this spot on my forehead had no pigment. I remember her washing my hair and freaking out. Whether these events are related, I don't know. There were many traumatic events in my childhood. These men were probably grooming me. I don't remember ever seeing them after holding their kittens. My childhood best friend told me stories that her dad told about a ghost woman being shackled in their yard, and if you're real quiet, you can hear her chains rattling in the night. That made me terrified to ever go into their yard. They had moved to a farm town about 45 minutes away when I was in middle school. Her dad said there was an owl haunting them in their house. He also kept a glass jar on the door handle at night as security. Her parents often hung out in their bedroom with the door closed and were not to be disturbed. I thought it was weird, but that's about it, as my friends seemed happy. Years later, she told me they were heavily into meth. A lot of things cleared up for me. I don't talk to any of them anymore, but they have been clean for over 10 years now, other than her dad smoking weed and cigarettes. Her mom has rap, so she's always on painkillers and steroids. They love their grandkids, so I think they will refrain from using ever again. My dad is emotionally abusive, and he would do things like take us walking in woods and disappear until we found him, or put me in a room if I didn't say sorry for something I did. I told my mum about things like this. They are divorced, so this was with them, and she would ask him to stop. She wanted him to be good, and it took a little while until she realized he wasn't going to change, and she said if we didn't want to go we wouldn't have to, but she didn't have a choice. Since she works 2 jobs she had to send us there. And he would say I lied, and those things never happened, and he'd keep doing that, and saying I was happy when he called me names, and did stuff like I said. I started not trusting my own memories and feeling guilty, and begged mum to stop telling him off, because every time she did it got worse, and we were stuck for years like that. He started saying he wouldn't give me seconds of food, watch the sweets, and you need to tone up. Things that all skirted around something he thought that I was fat, and I wasn't, which almost made me anorexic. I lost a kilo in a month before my mum and the doctor could pull me out before it got too deep. Nobody talks about emotional abuse, and I didn't know this wasn't normal for years. No one says that things like this affect social interactions and trust, and little though the single acts seem, they chip away at you. I'm out of it now and getting better. I developed depression and anxiety partially because of this, partially because other things, and I want to say to anyone with things like this, you are not alone. You can make it through. There was a guy one street over named Mark. He was maybe in his 30s and lived alone on a semi-rural property. My friend and I were little girls and about 8 years old. Our parents let us roam free within the neighborhood boundaries until the sun went down. My friend kept telling me about Mark, how he had all kinds of cool stuff in his backyard, and how he always had candy and video games in his house. I thought it was weird that she was on first name basis with a dude that lived a street over without any kids, but there was another old lady on our street that we called the cookie lady. She loved to bake and would hand out little cookies to kids that knocked on her door. Anyways, I never knew when she was over at his house. I guess whenever she wasn't playing with me, she was over there. She tried to get me to go with her a few times, but I just got a bad feeling about it. Like, why would I want to go to a middle-aged man's house to play? My friend never confided that he was doing anything inappropriate with her, but going into her teen years she got heavily into drugs and drinking and slipped into a deep depression. She started cutting herself in grade 6 and locked herself in the bathroom a couple times and came out with cut marks on her arms. It's only when I grew up I put 2 and 2 together. I put Mark and the address of his house into Google one day to see if he might have been a sex offender. He was arrested when I was 14 for child porn. No such offenses against children though, so I assume she never told anyone. I'm positive he molested her for at least 2 years and was trying to get her to bring me there to get groomed as well. I mean, it's not that I knew it wasn't faked up, but just like, I don't know, here I have a few. 1. I grew up with a single mom who was an immigrant, so she didn't have family up here, and she worked 14 hours a day sometimes and go hungry just so she could make sure I ate. Didn't have to be this way for the most part, she just had no clue how to manage money tbh. But anyways, I would come home from school at 3 PM and just play video games until 11 PM to 1 AM every single day and go to school because she was never home. Sometimes I wouldn't eat because I wasn't sure how to cook yet, so for the most part 1 raised myself for a good 3 to 5 years. 2. When I was really young, this faked up teenage guy I knew started beating his dick. I'm 7 or something by the way, and he was in front of me, and innocent me had no clue what he was doing or what the fuck it was, so I asked if he could touch it, and yeah, we are not going down this rabbit hole. 3. My dad was an alcoholic, and whenever I'd go to his house he was usually verbally abusive. He'd drive drunk, and he'd force me to watch horror movies like The Exorcist and whatnot. Honestly, I have memory of pulling the blankets over my face and eyes trying to not watch some vampire movie from back in the day. 4. My mom and her boyfriend was like 8 to 9 at the time maybe, would leave me out in the living room with only his dog for company for hours. I didn't know what they were doing, and I was told to not even come near the door, so I sat there, no TV, nothing, just the dog for hours. I never heard a sound either. Every male figure in my life has been a shitty human being, and every female figure in my life has never stuck around or spent enough time with me to leave an impression. My ex's mom and dad were the closest thing that I had to consider real family, but my ex broke up with me, so it'd be weird if I just messaged them. Honestly, I'm 19 in 2 months and I know I'm faked up. I think about ending it all on the daily and so much more than that, but I hide it pretty well. Edit. There's probably more, but this is enough for edit. Edit. My grandmother was a homeopathic doctor, I think it's called, and she'd have pills and stuff all over the place on shelves and sheet that I probably wasn't supposed to reach. Anyways, the pills were special sugar pills mixed in with whatever medicine she needed to prescribe. Little me would pop them like candy by climbing onto the couch and stealing them and just chewing on them and sheet. Edit to my edit. As a kid I told my grandmother that I only ate maybe once a day at school since my mom was never home or never cooked, and so if it was okay if I asked her to make me some food. It was almost midnight or 1 AM and she was just horrified and said yes and started making me food. I love my grandma. After reading all of these messed up things in people's lives, I've come to realize that my life has been great and my parents have done a great job raising me. There were fights and issues, but there was never anything as screwed up as some of the things people revealed. Thank all of you for making me realize that I'm off to a good start in life with no hardcore traumatic experiences at 16 years old. But, for the sake of the thread, I'll tell a story from when I was 14 years old. Some friends were sleeping over at my house. It's 5 AM. Mom comes home drunk. She agrees to let me drive to the airport to pick her friends up. I had my permit. I knew how to drive fine. We leave. Friends are asleep. I drive down the street, and it's pitch dark out. No street lights that I remember. A man is drunk with a black hoodie on standing in the street not moving at all. I'm going about 45 miles per hour before I see him 10 feet in front of me. I slam on the brakes and hit him at about 30 miles per hour. He moves last second and his head hits the truck mirror. Thank goodness he only hit the mirror and moved last second. If he went under he would have been done for. I hop out of the car screaming if he's alright. In shock. My mother hops behind the wheel and tells me to get in. I hop in. Crying. Mumbling. I hit him. We drive down the street where my dad picks me up and we bring my friends to his place. Parents are not together. Dad cheated when I was 13. The next day we go to the cops. We clearly were freaking out and screwed up by driving away. I feel so bad to this day that I caused that veteran brain damage and my mother a felony. I didn't even get in trouble. Just my mother did. I would take any amount of time in juvie to end the case. They took the truck and we just got it back today. It helped me learn though, and I don't regret a thing. My mother stopped drinking completely after that. I'm happy now, and I hope I get to speak with the man that was standing in the street to apologize for causing him such an injury and scream in his face for standing in the street at 5 AM drunk. Thank you for reading. I hope you guys carry on great lives even through the messed up childhood memories. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, a 14-year-old retard that lived a few doors down tried to molest a neighbor's kid. The kid told his parents. His parents confronted the retard's father, who was pretty much a retard himself. The next 6 hours or so were like something out of a hillbilly horror movie. Yells started to emerge from the retard home. Then lots of wailing and crying. Clearly the news had spread, because all of the parents on the street started to gather round to spectate. The wails turned to screams and pleading. The crowd cheered. This went on for an hour or more. It went from early evening to full dark. At some point during this, it went from just occasional screams to whipping sounds and continuous screaming and pleas for mercy. The crowd got bored and went home. The next day the retard was seen wandering around covered in cigarette burns and welts from being whipped with a belt buckle. Nobody even considered calling police. They would not have been welcome. To be fair, the retard made a full recovery and ceased his molesting activities. The Todd family had a younger kid that would run up and down the side of their house yelling bastard 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 endlessly. If you attempted to interact with it, he would stop dead, point straight at you, and scream you a faking cunt. That appeared to be the extent of its vocabulary. The mother was a small woman with long dark hair who was rarely seen. I don't remember ever speaking. One day she came staggering out of the house holding a large pot of cooking oil that was well and truly ablaze. She dumped it on the sidewalk where it blazed on for quite a while. A good amount of oil must have soaked into the ground under the paving slabs, because it sustained a massive ant colony for many years thereafter. This circus was in the UK in the early 1970s. We lived on that street for 5 or 6 years, and it was pretty much a gold mine of faked up shit. We moved somewhere sane a few years later, thank fuck.